The Dragonborns preferred sitting comfortably in the automobile rather than walking the whole way to the Queen's region. After all, it would have taken them 10 times the time and effort. But for Michael, who used to live a world where travel was nothing more than a few hours or even less than a day, this journey was a bit of a bore. Although he customized his automobile into a camper van complete with a built-in shower, bed, and kitchen, Michael still couldn't stand the monotony of his daily life in the car. He eventually called out to Fudge, who diligently came out of his shadow and presented himself to Michael. "You call, master?" "Hey, Fudge, do you have any clones near Orcus Town?" Michael asked. With his supreme skill, Unity Gathering, he could take control of Fudge's clones and easily take their place, allowing him to transport himself to Orcus Town in an instant. The edgy ninja slime nodded its head, feeling millions of its clones spread around the area. Most of it was in the King's region, but there were some sparse few attached to the shadows of traveling peddlers in the Queen's region. "I found it, master. There's one close to Orcus Town." Fudge answered. "Thanks. I'll have to borrow your skills for a second," Michael said as he raised his hand and grasped the air towards Fudge. "No probs, master." The dark mana comprising Fudge's slime body started to vibrate, alienating themselves from Fudge's very existence. His own mana, the power hidden inside a being that only they were supposed to have access to, was now being controlled by Michael's supreme skill with extreme ease. Somewhere beyond the forest were a group of fleeing peddlers, seemingly scared out of their wits as they heard the roaring sounds coming from the orcs. Unbeknownst to one of them, a single violet slime popped out from their shadows and landed on the ground. The peddlers left the scene, none the wiser. The violet slime, crawling through the grass, suddenly vibrated as its entire body began to morph and change into something completely different from its amorphous body. It elongated into a vaguely humanoid shape before finally transforming into an 11-year-old boy with golden hair and dashing young looks. Michael looked at his hands, satisfied to see that his body successfully transferred into Fudge's clone. Chat JK3. Can you locate Orcus Town and give me a direct route? Acknowledged. Cross-referencing topography of the current surroundings to a well-established map of the Queen's region. Current location found. Creating a waypoint for the last known location of Orcus Town complete. Michael suddenly saw a giant yellow arrow in the ground, pointing him due north. He began walking towards the direction it pointed at, and the arrow slightly changed its position to the right. As he continued following the arrow, Michael noticed that there were a lot of fissures and crevices on the ground, making for a very dangerous journey for normal people. One wrong step, and they could plummet into a chasm and get trapped with no way out. I guess Una was right. This place is also prone to earthquakes, Michael thought to himself. It didn't take him long before he finally caught sight of a civilization in the distance, with stone buildings peeking over the town walls. That's Orcus Town. According to different sources, that is indeed Orcus Town, replied ChatJK3. But as he got closer, he realized that it looked more like ruins rather than an active civilization. The walls were completely degraded, with plenty of cracks lining up with the crevices on the ground. Some parts were completely torn down, which lowered the security of the town significantly. Though Michael didn't know if any thieves or conquerors would even bother to do anything with a town this degraded. Michael used his supreme skill again to sense for the light mana present in Orcus Town. Thankfully, there was still a sufficient number of inhabitants for it to still be called a town, but the quality of their life was something left to be desired. Judging by the lack of earth and water mana present in their bodies, as well as their thin physiques, Michael knew that all of them were suffering from starvation and dehydration. The situation here is worse than I thought, Michael noted. Thankfully, I stocked plenty of food in our automobiles. He approached Orcus Town on foot, feeling the ground beneath his feet to sense for any upcoming disasters. Thankfully, there were no signs of another earthquake occurring in the region. He began walking through the streets of Orcus Town, looking at the abandoned houses and destroyed farmlands with pity. Even with the half-collapsed buildings all around him, Michael could see that Orcus Town used to be a prosperous place with a bustling life for its inhabitants. The torn-down stalls by the side of the street told him that there used to be a thriving market established in the town. Even the stone road was worn down by horse carriages crossing through them day and night. Michael could see a lot of history in this town. It was such a shame that natural disasters prevented this place from reaching its full potential. As Michael was strolling through Orcus Town, he was soon spotted by some locals who eyed him with a strange look. "Hey kid, what are you doing out here? Go to the market now, or else you won't have anything for yourself." Michael turned to the emaciated old man peeking out of his window. It was clear from his face alone that he was worried for the kid wandering the streets alone. It seemed that Michael was mistaken for one of the locals. Unlike most rich folk, Michael never really wore anything gaudy or flashy. A simple shirt and trousers were enough for him to be satisfied with. He was the comfort over style kind of guy even in his previous world. "What are you talking about?" Michael shouted back. "Bread," the old man yelled out. "You'll miss out on bread." Just as Michael was about to ask the old man what he meant by that, he suddenly heard a cacophony of excited shouting in the distance. It sounded like children getting excited at a birthday party. He didn't expect such jolly sound from a barren town. Michael curiously walked towards the center of the town, where the main wet market was established. As he did so, he saw a small gathering of small children lining up toward a single table. These children, despite looking a little bit thin and malnourished, were surprisingly healthier than the adults that he had been seeing in the town. Most of the people in Orcus Town remained inside their houses, choosing to lie down and sleep all day to conserve energy. This would allow them to be less hungry throughout the day. But somehow, these kids had enough energy to jump around excitedly as they looked towards this table. "Finally! I've been waiting for this since yesterday. Hee woo! I wonder what we're going to get today." The kids talked amongst each other with a giddy attitude. Michael slowly approached the crowd, mingling himself with the children. "Children, no pushing, okay? You'll get your turn eventually." On the other side of this wooden table was a middle-aged woman who showed a gentle smile towards the children. And even as the kids were overcome with excitement, they didn't disobey the woman and kept themselves in line. "Yes, we will," they all recited. Michael peered through the crowd and finally saw what was laid down on the table. He thought it was something special, but it was just a couple loaves of bread, not even enough to feed a single family of 4, much less a whole group of these children. He was quickly proven wrong. The middle-aged woman, wearing a worn-down apron, took out a loaf of bread and began to tear out small pieces to give to each and every child lined up at the table. "Thank you, miss," said one child as he gleefully chowed down on the piece of bread smaller than his fist. "Thanks. I'll savor it for a long time," said another child as he began to nibble at the bread, making sure not to eat it all in one go. Soon enough, every child got themselves a small piece of bread to eat, except Michael. The woman looked curiously at Michael, not recognizing his face. Her face showed worry and a little bit of panic as she realized that she had run out of bread pieces to give to him. She quickly rummaged through her wicker basket until she found a small baby carrot stuck in the edges. She turned towards Michael and gestured for him to come closer. "This is the only food I have for now. Come, take it." Michael looked at the middle-aged woman and saw the fading life mana in her body. She needed food more than anybody. Yet, she kept urging Michael to take the last piece of food in her basket. "There's no need," Michael said to her. "Oh, don't be shy, little boy. You need a lot of food to grow properly, okay?" The woman walked towards him and forced him to open his hand. Then, she dropped the baby carrot in his palms and closed his hands. "You're always welcome here," she said to him. Michael stared at the woman, touched by her generosity. "I haven't seen you before." One of the kids, munching on a piece of bread, spoke to Michael with a friendly face. "Here, looks like you weren't able to get one for yourself." The little kid broke half of the remaining bread in his hands and gave it to Michael without hesitation. It was already smaller than his fist, but now it had become the size of a strawberry. Even though he was clearly younger than Michael, the boy unselfishly gave Michael half of what he had despite risking hunger later on. "Are you new here? Have some of mine as well." Another kid approached Michael and tore off a small piece of bread for him. "I'm not that hungry. Can I share it with you? What's mine is yours. Let's get along well in the future, okay?" One by one, The kids began to give Michael small chunks of their food while introducing themselves to him. Even though he was a complete stranger to them, they treated him as if he was their family. Everyone's first thought upon seeing Michael was that he was one of the lost orphans who wandered into the town. He looked like he needed help. And when these kids needed help, the woman also gave them food to eat without any hesitation. Now, they were just paying it forward. Michael watched everything unfold, speechless at how kind everyone was to a total stranger. It was clear that they were the ones who needed help the most, yet they were the ones who helped others. "But how are you going to eat?" Michael asked the middle-aged woman. "Don't worry about me, boy. I already ate my fill," she said, exaggeratingly patting her belly as if she was incredibly stuffed. It didn't take long for Michael to realize what was happening. He looked around the town and saw all the senior and elderly people peeking out of the windows with satisfied smiles on their faces. Even though only the children were eating food, they didn't argue or beg for some. It seemed that they had chosen to leave all the food to the children, leaving nothing for themselves. If they had rationed the food for all the people in town, they would only last a couple of days. But if only the children ate the food, then they could last for months longer. Seeing this warmed his heart. The people here were still filled with goodwill despite the horrible situation they were in. They helped each other survive and were even willing to sacrifice themselves just to give the children a better chance at surviving. Michael made a decision right there and then. He was going to help this town. Michael spent the rest of the day with the locals of Orcustown, seeing firsthand how horrible their living situation was. Most of the time, the kids and the adults journeyed out into the dangerous forest to try and find some fruits and berries they could eat. However, they couldn't gather enough sustenance to live satisfied day to day. Most fruit-bearing trees were either smashed into the ground or fallen into the crevices on the ground. The only water source they had come from the rain, which only comes once in a while. Michael talked with the middle-aged woman and found out her name was Beth. She was one of the only locals who stayed in Orcustown despite its horrible state. He asked her how things deteriorated so badly for the town. "We already asked for help from the neighboring towns, but they couldn't, due to the dangerous terrain of the forests full of crevices and chasms. No one was able to send any large rations to the town. We also asked help from the order, but it would take them too long to get here. It came to a point where most people gave up and chose to move on to bigger and better things," she said with melancholy. "But not us. Why not? Wouldn't it be better to migrate to a much safer territory?" he asked her. Beth looked around the ruins of the once great Orcustown. Memories flashed in her eyes as she remembered a brief time when she was a kid, when there were people and demi-humans of all kinds traveling in and out of their town, carrying all sorts of goods and trade. "We can't move," she said. "Then we would be abandoning what our ancestors built for us through the years. You do not know this, but our town used to be the centerpiece for the Golden Road." Michael's ears perked as he heard something new. "Golden Road?" he asked her, expectantly curious. Just the name itself was triggering his intuition for business. Beth nodded her head. "Yes, the Golden Road, aptly named because of all the gold coins being traded in mass every single day in the market. Do you see that road leading outwards, leading further into the Queen's region?" Michael looked to the ends of the town, where the road was wide enough for 8 different horse carriages to pass through. He could see the signs of a well-designed stone road that led deeper into the horizon, but it seemed to have fallen victim to the earthquakes and natural disasters that befell this town. The Golden Road was nothing more than a chasm in the ground. There used to be thousands of carriages coming in and out of this town every single day, each one carrying product from all over the world, ready to distribute across the Queen's region. My grandmother used to sell spice. She had her store right there, just beside the building we use now for shelter. She told me that the Golden Road was what made our continent prosper and brought up with it our Orcustown. Michael's imagination sparked as he tried to look through to the past of Orcustown when the Golden Road was at its peak. Along with the sounds of horse hooves smacking on the stone road, he also heard spice sellers shouting towards the potential customers walking through the streets, tempting them to taste the mounds of salt and peppers on the table. He heard customers passionately plead for the price of apples to be lowered, arguing that the quality of the fruit was less than desired. He could even see a couple of rascal kids pocketing a loaf of bread in their shirts while the vendor was occupied with the customer. It was chaotic, but it was prosperous. From how Beth described it, the Golden Road seemed to be this world's equivalent to the famous Silk Road back in his previous life. It was a vast network of routes where merchants and peddlers exchanged goods and products to be spread throughout the Queen's region. And if that was true, then Michael was sure that the Golden Road could not only spread products and items, but also culture and ideas. If the Golden Road still existed, it could boost the Reborn company to even greater heights much faster and more efficiently than his original plan. "This is our home," Beth declared, "and we will not leave it no matter the circumstances." Michael's mind began to work as he tried to see the possibilities of the Golden Road, especially Orcustown, since it was the centerpiece of all trade and commerce in the Queen's region. "What if we recreate the Golden Road?" he asked Beth. The middle-aged woman looked at Michael with an amused expression. "Sure, kiddo. If you want to do that, then you must grow up healthily," she said, chuckling. Even though she didn't know where Michael came from, she treated him the same as any other kid in town who had lofty ambitions in the future. She didn't reject their dream, but she also didn't believe it would come true, at least not in this town. "I'm serious," Michael doubled down. "I'm sorry, but you're not the first one that has said that to us," Beth said. There were plenty of powerful royals or billionaire businessmen who offered to rebuild the town and revive the Golden Road. But eventually, they all gave up. "I'm sorry, but you're just a kid. There's nothing you or I can do to change the unfortunate circumstances of our town. That's just how it is." Beth pursed her lips and tried to console Michael, but it seemed that the kid wasn't even discouraged one single bit. There was a strange fire in Michael's eyes that somehow, just a little bit, made Beth believe that he could do what he wanted to do. There was a confidence in his eyes that was unlike that of a child. "Where did you say you're from again?" she asked him. But just as she said that, she suddenly heard excited shrieks come out of the kids as they looked on ahead of the gates. "Whoa, what's that? A box carriage. Where's the horse?" The ruckus from the kids forced Beth and all the seniors to slowly gather near the rundown entrance of the town. "Why are you all so noisy?" she asked them. But it seemed that the kids were far too excited to even acknowledge Beth. They simply pointed towards the horizon, where an envoy of carriages seemed to be coming from the very forest itself. "Miss Beth, are they the help that you've been talking about? Ooh, are they the heavenly knights that are going to save us?" The kids' imaginations went wild, especially since the horseless carriages weren't anything they had ever seen before or had ever thought about. But Beth knew that they weren't from the Order, nor were they from the Guild of Arcana. Matter of fact, they weren't even from the Queen's region at all. If they were, they would have come from the other side of the town, facing northwards and connecting to the Golden Road. The very reason why they weren't getting help from anybody was because it was extremely hard for carriages or just peddlers to get through the hazardous environment caused by the earthquakes. But now, these carriages, if it could even be called that, were coming with an army's worth of envoys with it. Beth and the other seniors were certain. They weren't from the Queen's region. Not only that, but they seemed to be coming from a place in the Queen's region inaccessible to anybody. After all, the dwarves had created for themselves an impenetrable wall on the other side with which no human or carriage could ever trespass. "Are they here to conquer us?" an elderly man asked Beth. "What could they possibly get in this town?" an elderly woman answered. "Well, who are they?" That was the question on everybody's mind. They could only wait with bated breaths as the horseless carriages approached their town at unbelievable speeds. "That's faster than a horse. And they're made of metal. How is it faster than a normal carriage if it weighs so much more?" After a few more minutes, the camper van automobile in front of the envoy finally arrived at the gates of Orcustown. The kids excitedly approached the strange vehicle, regarding it as some sort of wonder of the world. They looked through the tinted glasses of the automobile, trying to see who or what was inside them. "Beth, do you recognize that emblem?" one of the elders asked her. Despite how little she remembered during the age of the Golden Road, there was one thing that she was sure she would never forget. And those were the emblems of all the families and businesses that used to frequent Orcustown for trade. From what she remembered, Having complicated symbols adorned with gold designs was indicative of its stature in the global market. The Vanderbilt business symbol depicted hands holding the world, which were all adorned with real gold. The Osborne Consortium's insignia depicted that of a carriage traveling through a road, symbolizing their ability to sell any and all kinds of products all over the world. The Hephaestus Company's crest was that of a golden hammer striking a golden anvil. The Goldstone Group sign was a wooden house built upon fertile land, showing their expertise in all things real estate and housing. Sinclair's Elixir, headed by the famous alchemist and healer Sinclair, had a company logo showing a golden wreath representing health and prosperity. Those were the only major companies that Beth could think of that had the wealth and manpower to create something as strange as this vehicle. She didn't know how these horseless carriages worked, but she knew from the material alone that it was not cheap to produce. However, when she looked at the symbol by the side of this car, her memory came up blank. It had a simple R on the side of its door. It was elegant, but not gaudy or flashy like most companies like to have. I don't know who owns these, Beth admitted, but I do know that they weren't present during the age of the Golden Road. And they're certainly not from the Queen's region. If what she said was true, then there was only one possibility that they could think of. Are they from overseas? One elder asked. Beth could neither confirm nor deny their guess. But judging from the alien horseless carriages, it seemed to be the only possibility. The rest of the elders and seniors regarded the automobiles with curious but cautious attitudes, which was completely opposite to the kids who were simply happy-go-lucky in their approach to the vehicles. Hello? Is anyone there? Are you here to help us? They were crowding the camper van automobile before the door finally opened with a resounding click that surprised the children. They all slowly backed away from the door, letting its inhabitants finally show themselves to everyone. Oh, we're finally here. Where's Boss? Jacques said as he stretched his body. Ever since Michael disappeared on them, they traveled through the roads non-stop in an attempt to catch up to him, which meant no breaks in between travel. Where are we? Is this Orcus Town? Shiana asked as she surveyed her surroundings. She wasn't expecting it to look so destroyed. There's people looking at us, Amissa muttered, shyly walking to Jakku and hiding behind him. The kids looked at the Dragonborns with wide eyes, amazed at their cool scales and curved horns at the top of their heads. They had never seen such cool-looking demi-humans before. Whoa, that's really badass. Mister, what are you? One of the kids approached the red-scaled Zion and looked up at him in admiration. OOH. Me, I'm a mighty Dragonborn, Zion said, flexing his muscles and performing a few jabs for the kids, which they seemed to love as they cheered for every punch he released in the air. Meanwhile, Beth and the rest of the seniors looked on at the Dragonborns and realized their similarity to the famous Draconian race, especially with their scaled bodies and the draconic frills on their heads. They could only come to one conclusion. They came from overseas. Orcus Town used to be a place frequented by mermen and draconians alike because of the Golden Road trade, so Beth and some of the elderly people in town recognized the presence of dragon blood in these strangers. With just one look, they knew that the Dragonborns were overflowing with magic and talent, which was indicative of their draconic lineage. Excuse me, mighty beings, Beth said, respectfully approaching the Dragonborns. Can we have the honor of knowing your name? Among the Dragonborns, the only one who could answer her question was Shiana. Jakku was bored, stretching his body. Amissa was too scared to talk to anybody, and Zion was busy showing off his skills to his fellow children. We represent the Reborn Company, she answered proudly. Beth and the rest of the elderly looked at each other, realizing that they had never heard of this company before. We are honored that you have chosen to land in our town, but I am afraid that we do not have the resources to properly welcome a party of your lineage. We hate to make your years-long voyage in vain, but our town isn't doing well at all. The rest of the locals in Orcus Town bowed their heads towards the Dragonborns, apologizing for their inadequacy. Welcoming an envoy from the Draconian race needed a week-long feast of sheep and cows at the very least. It was nothing, just a few days at most, Jacques said, casually leaning against the automobile. Beth tilted her head. Just a few days? Forgive me for asking, but did you not come from overseas? The Dragonborns shook their heads. Shiina then pointed behind them, towards the flat plains just beside the tall mountain regions splitting the continent. We came from the king's region, Shiina answered. This made the locals even more confused. If the Dragonborns came from the king's region, then the only place they could have traveled through was the Dwarven Kingdom. But it was common knowledge that the Dwarven Kingdom refused any business, even from the mighty Draconian race. Has the Dragon Queen convinced the Dwarven King of an agreement? Beth muttered to herself. Dragon Queen. Zion interjected. Nah, it's our boss that made an agreement with the Dwarven King. Beth couldn't be more confused. A company was able to ally themselves with the Dwarven Kingdom? That would explain the metallic carriages. What is this Reborn company? Even in the peak of the Golden Road, she had never heard of any Dwarven representative participating in the trade. Even when profits could have surged in the millions of gold coins for the dwarves, they never budged in their closed-door policy. Now, a single company was able to change the minds of those stubborn dwarves? Not the entirety of the dragons, nor the elves, just a single company. If the Golden Road was still established, this news would have broken out and been spread all over the Queen's region. It would only take a few days at most before everyone would come knocking at the Reborn Company's doors to inquire about dwarven materials. Damascus steel, for example, would be an extremely hot commodity. Even in the Golden Road, there would be a bidding war whenever it was brought out into the market. The Hephaestus Company was famous for their ability to throw money in the wind just to buy out all the Damascus they could get their hands on. A lot has changed in the market after the Golden Road disappeared, Beth commented. But as we said, our town is not in good shape to welcome your party. Please relay our apologies to the Dragon Queen. We don't serve the Dragon Queen, Shiina replied quickly. Beth looked at their faces full of draconic influence. If they weren't part of the dragon race, then what were they? I believe I can solve this misunderstanding, a female voice said. Una and her ogre escort Agnes came out of the automobile behind Michael's camper van. Youngest daughter of the Montgomery family. Beth remembered. She remembered when the little girl visited them a few weeks back. Since she was a Montgomery, Beth and the locals treated Una with a lot of respect. After all, their family was famous for handling a lot of the conflicts and quarrels happening on the Golden Road every single day. They had the authority to decide the outcome of dispute cases, meaning that they held a lot of power in every territory of the Queen's region. Lady Una, Beth curtsied, and Una curtsied back. Can you please explain the Reborn Company to us? As expected of Una, she quickly caught the locals of Orcus Town up to speed with what had been happening in the King's region in terms that they could understand. She told them all about the nation of Reborn and how water and food were abundant in every territory that harbors a Reborn market. Beth and the kids gasped each time Una told them each feat the Reborn Company was able to accomplish. From flat concrete roads to free-flowing water, everything seemed like a dream. A city of stars? Whoa! One kid uttered, his eyes glistening. In that place, everyone can get to ride the metal carriage with just a few coins. I want to go there. I want to live there. Zion began telling all kinds of stories, some lies, some exaggerations, and some truths about his boss called Bro Mike. The kids ate them up, listening to his stories with amazed expressions. Meanwhile, Beth looked at Una with a disbelieving face. Are you affiliated with the Reborn Company? Una nodded. I'm helping them out a little bit. Beth couldn't believe it. As a Montgomery and a diplomat, Una was supposed to be an unbiased judiciary that held no bias for or against any one party. The Montgomerys acted like judges. So, there were a lot of people who tried to curry favor with them in the hopes of having their backs whenever there was a case involving them. Some royals and rich businessmen tried and failed to get the favor of a Montgomery. But now, a single company from the King's region was able to gain the favor of the youngest daughter of Montgomery, the very girl poised to become the next successor of her grandmother. Una could become the supreme judge of the entire human race. And if Reborn Company had a person of her stature on their side, then it could easily put them into an extremely unfair advantage. The Reborn Company had extremely advanced technology. They had demi-humans comparable to the Draconian race. They had the help of a Montgomery. And most of all, they had the privilege of trading with the Dwarven Kingdom something no one had ever done before. All of this made Beth wonder, who was the mastermind behind this company? Who was able to create a business this successful in just a matter of a few years? "We are grateful for the Reborn company to grace us with your presence," Beth said as respectfully as she could. She was in the presence of an esteemed company in the likes of the Osborne Consortium, the Goldstone Group, and even the Vanderbilt business. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" she asked them. "First of all, we are here to see our boss." "You should be here," Shiana said, scanning the surroundings with her eyes. Beth was alarmed upon hearing that. It made her nervous to think that a large dragon was somewhere above the skies, observing their every move. In her mind, the only creature that could create such a successful company was a dragon. "We haven't met your boss," Beth said, bowing to the Dragonborns. "Oh, he's here. Lord Michael." Shiana waved behind Beth as she caught sight of the familiar golden-haired boy in the background. It seemed that Michael was still too occupied with observing the ruins of the Golden Road. Only when Shiana waved to him did he finally react and wave back at them. Meanwhile, Beth looked at Shiana awkwardly. It took her a couple of seconds to realize that she wasn't waving towards her, but behind her. She turned around and saw no one there but some of the kids and their newest recruit, Michael. "Wait, Michael." The Dragonborns approached Michael and happily welcomed him back, as if he was gone for a long time. "We're here, boss." "Hello, bro Mike. Can I also have that shadow ability? Please? Please. I want to teleport too." Michael chuckled and consoled the bratty Zion. "Sorry, bro. You need a physical art skill for that. Once I get more spells, I'll modify it to fit your skill set." Yuna approached him too and pouted. "Is there no +1 for that shadow jutsu?" Meanwhile, Beth and the rest of the locals watched this scene with their jaws dropped. They would have never thought that the boss that they were talking about was the same Michael who had joined them just recently. Heck, no one would have ever thought that an 11-year-old boy was in charge of one of the fastest-growing businesses in the entire continent. "Michael, is this real?" Beth asked, disbelief written all over her face. "You own all of these automobiles? You have your own nation with food and water? That must mean you earn thousands of gold coins." The kids crowded over him the same way they crowded over him when they were giving him a piece of their bread. Except now, they were giving him stares of amazement. "Yup, I am the owner of Reborn Company," he confessed, albeit a little guiltily. "I should have told you sooner. But how is that possible? You're just a kid." Beth exclaimed. The helpless little kid she pitted turned out to be a billionaire. "I hear that a lot," he said to her. "Though, the only way I can answer that is that I'm older than I look." "But why?" Michael faced her. "I wanted to visit this place for myself. See it with my own eyes. And what I saw blew me away. You didn't have to share your food with me, but you did, even though you all had so little to eat. Despite the harsh conditions this environment has brought, you didn't hesitate to help me. Now, I want to repay the bread you have all given me with a little gift from me." He then turned to Shiana and asked her, "Did our packages arrive in good condition?" The white-scaled, eager Dragonborn nodded her head and presented Michael with the trucks they brought with them. With a single snap of her fingers, the truck's back door slowly lifted for everyone to see. And the first thing Beth noticed was the smell. It felt familiar. It wasn't just one distinct scent, but a mixture of many that triggered her memories. She was immediately brought back to the time when she was a kid, and she strolled through the Golden Road, seeing piles of fruits, vegetables, and all sorts of food on the stalls beside the streets. Beth slowly opened her eyes and saw the myriads of foods stacked up to the very ceiling of the automobile truck. The rest of the children and even some of the seniors walked closer to the truck, trying to see if what they were seeing was true. "Is that? I smell it. That smells good. Food. Finally food." One truck was full of leafy vegetables, still fresh and moist despite the long travel. The next truck was filled with cases of fruits, both exotic and common, with different colors and tastes. And lastly, one of the trucks seemed to be full of meat, which was frozen rock solid in the frosting container of the truck. "Meat?" Beth cried out. Even she was left flustered upon seeing the presence of food in such large quantities. She could literally swim in the cases of leafy cabbages, spinach, and much more. "What is this?" she asked Michael. He smiled and shrugged, a signature move. What else? This is my gift to all of you. Eat to your heart's content. There are no hunger and thirst while I'm here, he proclaimed. But none of them moved. It was too good to be true. They were afraid that if they moved, they would somehow wake up from this dream. Michael had enough and got up on the truck and began to throw apples, grapes, oranges, and every kind of fruit toward the starving locals of Orcustown. They caught as much as they could, not wanting any of it to be wasted. For the kids, this would be the first time they would fill their stomachs full. Michael and the Rebornians began to distribute all the food and resources they brought along to the starving locals of Orcustown. It didn't take long for them to crowd over the piles and piles of delicious fruits stacked up on the table. The kids, despite wanting to eat all they could at this very moment, didn't forget to repay the favor that the elderly gave them all this time. They began to go door to door in each house in town, waking up the seniors who were sleeping in their houses. Wake up. There's food. Food. Come out. The Reborn Company gave us something to eat. The seniors woke up groggily, some even having difficulty standing due to how malnourished they were. What are you talking about? I'll show you. Look, the kids guided them outside, where there were tables scattered all around, stacked with enough food to feed at least 20 elephants. There were even pots getting heated with meat and vegetable soup, just enough to fight off the cold in their bodies. They thought they were still asleep and dreaming. Let's eat, Michael said as he began pouring the soup into bowls and distributing it to each and every one that lined up. Looking at the warm meat and vegetable soup in their hands, the elderly locals of Orcustown couldn't help but laugh and cry at the same time. The warmth of the soup as they brought it to their mouths was a sobering sensation that made them realize this was real. The kids weren't that emotional as they quickly downed the soup in one go, slurping every bit of it from the bowl. The Rebornians quickly refilled their soups, making the children extremely happy. Michael watched on with a satisfied smile. Orcustown finally had their hunger satiated. There was only one other thing they needed: water. He looked down and used his supreme skill, Unity, gathering to observe all the mana present underground. Of course, the majority of everything he saw was earth mana, but with his sharp eyes and extreme sensitivity to mana, he was able to locate a vein of underground water present deep below the floor. There was an aquifer, with the water in sight. Michael opened his hand and grasped the very water molecules present below the ground and beckoned them to come closer to him. The water began to rise in a straight line, slowly breaking through the layers of soil and rock in the crust. There was no obstacle hard enough to stop this water mana from following Michael's orders, eventually breaking through the very flooring and creating a giant geyser that almost reached the skies. Wah! D-U-G-H. Beth and the elders felt the rumbling in the ground and thought that another earthquake was coming their way. But then they saw water suddenly burst up from the very ground, tearing through the stone road, creating a mist that briefly created a rainbow in the skies. Whoa, water. Ha ha ha. I'm taking a bath. I'm drinking it all. It's raining. The kids immediately surged towards the water, letting themselves get wet as if there was a storm in clear skies. They began to drink as much as they could, catching the mist of pure water spraying from the ground. Even the elders and seniors of Orcustown briefly turned into kids again as they joined the children basking in the geyser. They jumped, they cheered, and they danced seemingly in a trance. After all, when else would they experience such a day as this? They had their fill of nutritious food, and now they were in the presence of overflowing water. Some of them even brought jugs, clay pots, and anything else they could find to try and store as much water as they could. They knew rain wouldn't come anytime soon, so this would be their only source of water for a long time. Don't worry, Michael assured them. We'll make sure to tap into that water source for all of you to drink from every day. The Rebornian engineers didn't have to be told their jobs, as they immediately began to survey their surroundings and assess how they were going to build a plumbing system. Orcustown would now have water and food to survive their day-to-day lives. They had asked for help for a long time, yet no one came to their rescue. It came to a point where they no longer believed that anyone would come to their aid. But now, out of the blue, Michael and his Reborn company came out of the forest and gave them enough food to get them filled for a whole year. They weren't even from the Queen's region. They were from the King's region and knew nothing about their current situation, nor what they were before. As everyone enjoyed the food they were given, Beth approached Michael with a little bit of awkwardness in her steps. She didn't know how she could address him now. It made her remember how she treated him as nothing more than a lost orphan child, not the owner of a major business like the Reborn Company. Sir Michael, we don't know how to repay you. I'm just repaying what you gave me. In times of desperation, you gave me your bread and treated me as your own. Now, I'm treating you as one of mine, and I make sure that any Rebornian will never want for food or water ever again. We have an abundance of resources. There is no need to think of it as a big thing, he said to her, shrugging his shoulders. Beth was overwhelmed with emotions and bowed to him. Please, there's no need for that, Michael said, waving his hands. But you have saved our town from extinction. Without you, we would have perished from starvation. How could I treat you as the pitiful child as before? Michael almost choked while sipping his soup. Pitiful? Do I really look that bad? Lord Michael, this is why we keep telling you to wear something more appropriate for your stature, Xian interjected. We have already prepared a royal regalia for you to wear, adorned with gold from our mines and gems from the dwarves. Michael immediately shook his head. He liked wearing plain clothes. After all, he was just a chill guy. The locals of Orcus Town enjoyed the feast Michael prepared for them the entire day. One of the kids walked up to Michael and thanked him for his gifts with a gift of her own. She brought out all sorts of trinkets she kept to herself all these times, picked up from the rubble and the ruins of the previous tenants of Orcus Town. It's all that I have, she said. I hope it's enough to pay for all the food you gave us, mister. Michael felt touched and accepted the presents. He was given rusted jewelry, dirted but colorful buttons from clothes, wooden charms of the goddess, combs, and other such bits and pieces that used to hold significant value during the time of the Golden Road. He appreciated them even though they had no actual value. Thank you, he said to her. Seeing this, the other kids began taking out their belongings and giving Michael the payment for the food and water that he gave them. Of course, he accepted them. It would be insensitive and selfish of him if he didn't. After all, these trinkets showed their sincerity in thanking him. One such kid gave Michael a strange almond-shaped seed that they found in the forest. It's quite bitter, the kid said. We snack on it sometimes, but we can't eat too much because our tummy would hurt. Michael looked at the bean in his hands and felt as if it was familiar to him. It also had a combination of fruity and nutty scent, which made him think that he had seen this kind of seed before in his previous life. Chat JK3, do you recognize this seed? The molecular composition of this seed had a lot of similarities to the fruit borne by the Theobroma cacao tree, also known as the cacao beans. Chat JK3 explained. In other words, Michael was holding chocolate in his hands. The tasty snack that had captivated billions of people back in his previous life was now in his hands. In its purest form, no one knew how valuable this seed was. Just like what the kid said, anyone who tried to eat cacao beans raw would only taste something completely bitter. But Michael knew he could turn it into the sweetest thing in this world. Where did you find this? He asked the kids. It's in the forest, they said. But most of the trees are crushed or fallen into the crevices on the ground. Michael thanked them and immediately used a flight, spell to head directly over to the forest, surprising the kids and eliciting gasps of amazement. It only took him a few minutes to finally see a bird's-eye view of the entire forestry surrounding Orcus Town. And up above, he could see all the large cracks and fissures brought on by the earthquake, with large parts of the entire forest floor subducting under another part and creating a crevice. Most of the trees were uprooted from their very, with some falling deep into the depths of the cracks. Chat JK3, can you locate more beans like this? Understood. Memorizing elemental mana composition of the cacao-like bean in this world. Complete. I have found a signature that matches that of the cacao bean in your hands. Transmitting the location in your brain. Michael's eyes glinted as he suddenly saw a few bright spots on the forest floor. And upon closer inspection, It was indeed the same bean he held in his hands. Most of what he saw were on the crevices on the ground, which must have been crushed as they fell into the cracks. But there were still a few left untouched by the earthquake disaster. He raised his hand, focusing his mind on the few good cacao beans that were still in great condition. He made sure to exclude those that were already expired or damaged from the natural hazards of the forest floor. He focused on the unique earth manna signature of the cacao beans and pulled them closer to himself, lifting them from the ground and gathering them in front of him. The white cacao beans floated patiently in a bunch, waiting for Michael to relay his next instructions. Please give me the instructions on how to process cacao beans into chocolate, Chat JK3. His brain felt a familiar sensation as the information washed over his mind, giving him the intuitive knowledge to turn this bitter cacao bean into another business opportunity that had the potential to spread all over the world. It was completely unfortunate that the trees for the cacao trees were completely devastated due to the earthquakes, or else it could have been a good start for his would-be chocolate business. If he were to plant a seedling right now, it would take years for it to fully grow into maturation, even if any other farmers used their specific skills and talents to hasten its growth. He already decided to send back some seeds to Reborn Nation for them to immediately start a cacao farm. But for now, it looked like he wouldn't be able to get chocolate in the lineup of Reborn products. I guess the consolation prize is that I have enough to make chocolate for everyone. To turn these cacao beans into chocolate, Michael needed to ferment them into a container for a few days. But since every life form in this world consisted of some kind of light manna, Michael could easily bolster bacteria growth and make the fermentation process speed up by mere minutes. Now that it had turned brownish from its original white color, it was time for him to roast them. With a simple ember spell, he was able to bring out the cacao's natural chocolatey flavor and create cacao nibs. After grinding them into a thick paste, Michael refined the liquid and tempered it before he could finally turn it into its famous blocky rectangular form. Of course, Michael had to briefly return to the nation of Reborn to get some sugar and other ingredients to add to the chocolate and make it taste a little bit sweeter. Without further ado, Michael took a bite and tasted its rich and sweet flavor, melting in his mouth in just a few seconds. Success! Michael returned to Orchistown with multiple bars of chocolate wrapped in giant leaves. He landed in the middle of the market and was immediately swarmed by the locals of Orchistown. Even the Dragonborns crowded over him, with Shiana a little bit upset that he didn't tell anyone that he was going off on his own. Lord Michael, we're your personal bodyguards. You can't go off on your own without at least informing us. I'm angry too, Omissa muttered shyly. Michael raised his hands guiltily. Sorry, but I was able to make something good in the forest. Here, have a taste. Shiana, the white-scaled, serious dragonborn with a lot of pride, wasn't receptive to Michael's attempt at placating them. Thankfully, though, Amisu was a little bit more curious as she slowly peeked at the strange black bars in Michael's hands that were emitting an intriguing scent. It's a tasty snack called chocolate. Want to have a bite? He asked all of them. The children wouldn't say no to a gift. They quickly lined up in front of Michael and waited as they gave them each a single bar of chocolate. At first, they thought that the chocolate tasted similar to wood. After all, its color was strangely similar to that of bark. But with a single whiff, they immediately sensed the sweetness hidden inside the chocolate. As they took a bite, their eyes widened with amazement, as if a whole new world had just opened for them. They never knew food could taste this sweet. The chocolate seemed to have melted inside their mouths quite easily, making them crave for more. Whoa, sweet, I want more. Jaku and Zion also took a chocolate bar from Michael, fascinated at what strange new things Michael had concocted this time. And with their changed physiology as a dragonborn, their senses were heightened to an even greater degree, allowing them to taste all the little nuances in the chocolate. It was rich and earthy while also being bitter and sweet. Amazing, Jaka commented, taking another bite. Bro Mike, I want more. Do you have more? Zion said, with his chocolate bar already eaten halfway, threw in one bite. Sis, you gotta try this. Amisu and Shiana both finally took a bite out of chocolate bar. It's good, right? Do you both forgive me now? Michael asked them. Shiina was silent, trying hard not to show a smile on her face as the chocolate melted in her mouth. Yes, can I have more? Shiina said, becoming even more shy than Amisu. It became quite a sight to see as Shina's white scales began to turn pinkish red as she became shy and embarrassed. Me too. I want more. I want more. More, please. Amisu passionately shouted. Don't worry. I have enough for everybody, he said to them, flashing multiple chocolate bars as if they were cards. Meanwhile, Beth was approached by one of the kids and was shown a chocolate bar with a clear bite mark on its side. Miss Beth, do you want to try it? She looked at Michael, confused. He didn't explain anything and simply offered her a chocolate bar of her own. And just like the kids, just a single bite was enough to overwhelm her taste. It tasted sweet, even more than sugar. Sugar was already a precious and rare product in the Golden Road, with its price being raised sky high for its demand. But this dark bar was even tastier, richer, and sweeter than any product that was sprinkled with sugar. She could only wonder how the Golden Road of old would react to such an exotic product. She was sure that this would cause a commotion even overseas. Intrigued? Guess what I used to make that, he asked her. Sugar. Well, part of it. But the main ingredient is this, Michael said as he took out a single white cacao bean in between his fingers. That's cacao, but that's supposed to be bitter. She and the rest of the Orcustown locals would have never thought that such a sweet snack would come from an almost worthless fruit they had just thrown away in the past. Beth was filled with hope, thinking that cacao beans could be used to make chocolate, but was quickly disheartened once she remembered that the earthquake decimated the forest. Bro, Michael. One of the kids motioned for him. How do you become so cool? I also want to make chocolate and fly and have lots of food and all sorts of things. Beth ruffled the kid's head. It's probably his awakened talent, she explained. Can I also awaken my talent? She asked him innocently. Beth showed a pained expression. Unfortunately, we need to visit a church for that, and it costs a lot of money. It was even more unfortunate to think that the kid was just about to turn 11 years old, meaning the window for his awakening was coming to a close. There's one way that I could help not just you, but the entirety of Orcustown, Michael revealed. Beth questioned Michael with her eyes. What do you mean? You could become part of our nation of Reborn. If you join us, then we can help you renovate Orcustown into a bigger and better place. We will give you access to water and food so that you will never go hungry ever again. And as citizens of our nation, then you are entitled to have a talent awakening of your own. It doesn't matter if you've missed your chance. I can still help you reach your peak. If you would allow us, we would reconstruct all the broken buildings and structures to make them more resilient against earthquakes, where you no longer have to worry about the roof collapsing at night. And most of all, we can rebuild the glory days of Orcustown by recreating a new Golden Road. What do you say? Beth and the other locals of Orcustown looked at each other, and slowly, their eyes moistened with emotion. After experiencing everything that the Reborn Company could offer, they knew that joining their nation was everything they could have ever asked for. The answer to Michael's question was easy. Orcustown had been degrading for a long time, without anyone in the Queen's region stepping up to help them. In short, they were abandoned without even a chance to fight for themselves. Even though they were once beloved during the times of the Golden Road, no one seemed to have remembered that in the current times. Now, Michael was offering them the chance to be part of something greater, part of a nation that was doing something extremely different from what anyone had ever done before. This was a no-brainer. They would have said yes just from the food he gave them earlier that day. Now, he was offering to completely renovate Orcustown into something that they could finally be proud of. The children immediately nodded their heads, not even fully understanding the weight of this moment. It would be a lie to say that they weren't captivated by the prospect of becoming as strong as the Dragonborns. But the fact that they could have something to eat and drink every day was enough for them to be satisfied. Beth and a couple of the older locals of Orcustown had a little meeting amongst themselves where the unanimous decision between them was a resounding yes. They talked amongst themselves because they were the only ones who knew how monumental this decision was. Back in the glory days of the Golden Road, There were plenty of sovereign nations that tried to get Orcistown under their banner, either peacefully or through force. But in the end, Orcistown remained independent against any attempt. Their ancestors knew the power Orcistown held due to its vital position in the Golden Road. Allying or submitting to another nation would be tantamount to handing them the very keys of the treasury chest of the Golden Road. Back then, everyone knew the importance of Orcistown and tried to ensure that it would remain in neutral territory. Zir Montgomery, Yuna's grandmother, made sure of that. But now, everyone seemed to have forgotten it along with the importance of the Golden Road. This allowed Michael and his Reborn nation to take Orcistown under their wings. The effects of this submission were not entirely clear as of yet, especially since Orcistown was still a rundown territory and the Golden Road was still a thing of the past. Only time will tell. Of course, Michael always liked to hurry things up. So, he quickly officialized the agreement with Orcistown, signing papers and all that stuff. Thankfully, they had a professional in their midst. Yuna looked through every deed in Orcistown with a meticulous eye. Motivating her was Michael's promise to give her a large shipment of extra bitter dark chocolate to take home. She happily hummed one of her songs as she parsed through the papers, which Michael subconsciously copied as he double-checked her work. "Everything looks fine," she said, handing him the contract. "It just needs everyone's signature." Michael was the first one to sign, after which he quickly handed it over to Beth and the locals. "We'll all sign it," she said to everyone. "This is our decision, which means that we'll all be part of this historic moment." She signed and passed it on to everyone, including the children, who gleefully scribbled whatever they wanted. Finally, Eunice signed it as well, certifying that she was the third-party witness to this contract. "Congratulations," she said. "Michael, would you do us the honor of telling us the new name of this town?" This was a monumental occasion, with the nation of Reborn finally establishing another city/town outside their capital. Michael hoped that there would be more territories in the future, so he decided to have all upcoming territories with the same naming convention. "I hereby call this place as Neo-Orcus, the second territory of the nation of Reborn." The Dragonborns clapped and cheered. "It's a celebration. Bring out the fried chicken." "Congratulations, Lord Michael. Can you eat more chocolate? Now that you're part of our nation, I guess I'll be your senior." Zion said to the children, "Don't worry, I'll whip you all into shape." The newly minted citizens of Neo-Orcus cheered and hugged each other emotionally, as if they were finally liberated from a cage that had been locking them down for all their lives. Beth and the other seniors approached Michael and thanked him profusely. "Thank you, Michael. I hope that we can make our nation prosper even more than it is now." Michael nodded. "Of course. Our first step is renovating this town to become a little bit more Rebornian. After that, we can worry about the Golden Road." The celebrations and feasts lasted for about a day, with the Rebornians teaching the new citizens about the customs of their nation. They talked about baseball, beer, fried chicken, and all the things they missed back in the capital city of the Reborn nation. The locals of Neo-Orcus couldn't wait to implement all the culture into their new homes. Just hearing about cold and hot showers with a turn of a lever was enough to stoke their imaginations and expectations. But of course, to do that, they needed entirely new infrastructure. The Rebornian engineers, made up of the very best demi-humans for the job, began to survey the entire land, assessing the faults in the ground. Based on a single glance, it seemed that most of the infrastructure of the old Orcistown needed to be completely torn down to install a much better foundation that could withstand the frequent earthquakes in this region. There were a lot of things to be done, which was helped by the fact that Michael began awakening the talents of the Neo-Orcus citizens. With the new skills, talents, and knowledge they gained with ChatJK3's help, everyone quickly began with their work tearing down the deteriorated buildings in town. After a few days, the whole town had been completely leveled, and a few more after that, the very foundation for the new territory began its work. As Neo-Orcus Town began its rejuvenation, the locals made do with a couple of small houses to live inside in the meantime. Although it was basic, it was much better than their original dwelling, which had a 50% chance of collapsing and trapping them under. Not only that, but they had access to all the food and water they could stuff themselves with. Thanks to the refrigeration in Michael's truck, the slabs of meat stored inside could be rationed for a long time without spoiling. And if need be, he could always teleport back to the nation of Reborn to pick up more food. So, everyone was energized as they helped the Rebornian engineers in creating a bigger and better place for Neo-Orcus. Bread? Anybody. Beth awakened her talent as a baker and immediately used her skills to create energizing pastries for everyone to enjoy while working. Michael was even able to teach her how to create one of the most famous breads in his previous life, the croissant. She spent the majority of her hours in the makeshift bakery the engineers made for her and kept on creating amazingly scented goods that made everyone hungry for more. And like most people Michael awakened, the locals of Neo-Orcus found themselves looking at least 10 years younger. Their bodies no longer look emaciated and now look a lot healthier. Despite the sounds of ongoing constructions and buildings collapsing, this led to a period of peace for the inhabitants of Neo-Orcus. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the forest surrounding Neo-Orcus was a wooden village made up of the Orcanine tribe. These orcs wore minimal armor, if any, and only had a loincloth that covered their private parts. Their fur, muscles, and fats were enough deterrents for any attacks that came their way. Subsequently, this became a point of pride for the orcs. Those who were able to take swords and spears only with their bare skin would be considered a lot more heroic than others and praised by all. Their wolf-like ears were decorated with rings and feathers symbolizing their feats and achievements. Performing a successful hunt, siring a child, or showing dominance against their rival tribe were examples of such. Those that had more ornaments were considered to be superior and were treated a lot better in their village. None was more superior than their chieftain, whose fur was thicker than all, fats bulkier than most, and a tusk sharper than any knife. The leader of the orc-canine hybrid demi-humans sat on his throne decorated with the furs and quills of his enemies, for his ears were already decorated with too many ornaments. Have they surrendered? The Orcanine chieftain asked his servants, his tone showing his tiredness. They had been fighting in an ongoing civil war with the Orcupine tribe ever since the Earth Goddess showed her wrath and sent a tremor in the lands. They, too, were deeply affected by the earthquakes since their main source of food came from the very forest destroyed by the disaster. The two tribes had a rivalry since the very beginning, but it was more of a friendly banter rather than a serious grudge. However, the destruction of the forest and the degradation of the Golden Road led to fewer resources for both tribes, eventually leading to a civil war as both tribes wanted to monopolize the remaining resources in the territory. The forest became a place too small for two tribes. They knew that if both tribes continued to live in the same territory, then they would all perish from starvation. One of them would have to be cast out from their territory. But of course, each tribe felt themselves deserving of staying in their land rather than the other. The Orcanine tribe knew they were much stronger than the cowardly Orcupine tribe, while the Orcupine tribe knew the airhead Orcanine tribe would only destroy the land rather than nurture it. Each tribe had a claim to their territory, meaning none of them would back down in this fight. Chief, those spineless orcs refused to give way. They have shown no intent of leaving our land, an orc reported. The Orcanine chieftain scoffed. Typical, he said. The chieftain thought that it was quite ironic that the Occupine tribe with bodies full of spines and quills were being spineless and refusing to look for a different land for their tribe. Send more troops. Show them that we are the blessed ones, the chieftain ordered. Although their grudge ran deep, both orc tribes refused to settle their feud with violence. They were not savages, after all. Instead, they opted to show their dominance through worship. These orcs revered the Earth Goddess, as she was the one who gave them the sustenance to survive. And to show their thanks for all the gifts that she has given them, the orcs smacked their bodies and shouted to the top of their lungs. The orcs believed that whoever worshipped the goddess more was the one who was worthy of staying in her grace. The Orcanine and the Orcupine tribes both believed they were orcs superior in worship. We shall show them that the goddess favors us. The trees say so, the chieftain said as he got up from his throne and got out of his tent. The orcs slapped their thighs in respect as soon as they saw him, which also signaled to the others that they were in the presence of the chieftain. "Take me to our sacred place," the chieftain said. Orc guards guided their chieftain deeper into the forest, where their sacred worshipping place was located. As they walked into the forest, the variety of trees seemed to become more and more homogeneous, before eventually having only one type of tree in an entire area. This particular type of tree did not have thick trunks, wide leaf crowns, nor a tall stature. It was just enough for the orcs to walk up and pick up one of its fruits growing on the stems. The chieftain looked up at the nearest fruit in front of him. After a long time, it had finally turned brown, ready for harvest. "I thank the goddess for bestowing upon us this cacao," he said as he pulled out one of its pods from the stem. The trees that the orcs were worshipping turned out to be cacao trees. The orcs treated cacao, locally known as cacao, as something sacred and deeply connected to the earth goddess. Because of that, their territory had thousands upon thousands of cacao trees surrounding it, each one mature and ready to bear fruit all year round. The Orcanine tribe and the Orcupine tribe both worshipped these trees and protected them from any harm. It was a tradition for them to plant 10 seeds to replenish any dead trees in the area, making sure that their sacred place was still blessed by the goddess. This was started by their ancestors and was continued by each chieftain in history. It was a reason why this place was so important to the orc tribes. By leaving, they would also leave the place blessed by the goddess. Even if they found fertile ground elsewhere, it would take them years and upon years to create a forest of cacao trees ready to bear fruit. None of them were willing to leave. But if it would help the cacao trees in the long run, then both orc tribes were willing to leave. However, each chieftain thought that their counterpart wasn't capable of protecting and nurturing the cacao trees. The Orcanine tribe excelled in strength and power, especially since their species was a hybrid of orcs and wolves. However, their defensive capabilities were something left to be desired. Their aggressive nature was good in attacking others, but they were quite useless in defending the holy cacao trees from any outside attack. Meanwhile, opposite them was the Orcupine tribe, who excelled in their defense. Since they were a hybrid of orcs and porcupines, they had protective spines and quills that allowed them to essentially shoot out spears in all directions, enough to pierce through any metal armor. They were great in defense, but they had little to no attacking capabilities. Their main strategy was to hunker themselves down in one place and shoot anyone that came close. But of course, that had a weakness of its own. Without any offensive abilities, their potential enemies would be free to attack and retreat without any consequences at all. They would be able to replenish their energies, while the Orcupines would be stuck in one place, unable to rest. Eventually, they would get worn down and allow the enemies to charge through. The Orcanine and the Orcupine tribe both had their strengths and weaknesses. The problem lay in the fact that none of them had the capability to fully defend their holy ground, which was why neither was willing to back down. "Why can't he understand?" the Orcanine chieftain muttered to himself. "Overwhelming offense is the best defense, especially with the blessing of our goddess." The chieftain cracked open one of the cacao pods with his bare hands. He searched underneath its brown hard-shell exterior and came across a collection of luscious white seeds. He took one of the seeds and observed it curiously. It was hard for him to believe that such a little seed held so much blessing from the goddess. He then put it in between his teeth and crushed it into pieces before gulping it in one go. "Bitter," he commented, with his face scrunching in displeasure. Even after eating cacao beans countless times, orcs still detested the taste of bitterness in their mouth. It was a taste that they hated the most. If it weren't blessed by the goddess, then they would spit out any cacao beans they ate. Despite how they hated the taste, they still ate it regardless. They treated it as the goddess test. If they couldn't even bear the taste of one of her most precious creations in nature, then they didn't deserve to have her blessing. The chieftain closed his eyes, ready to receive the blessing of the goddess. Suddenly, a visible red aura began to manifest around the chieftain's body, empowering him with energy and pure strength. His muscles bulged, veins popping out. The fur in his body stood on end, instinctively feeling the enormous physical strength boost that the cacao bean gave him. Just one bean allowed him to almost double the size of his muscle mass, allowing him to exhibit twice the physical strength of his normal body. This was the goddess' blessing to them. Of course, there was nothing special in the cacao beans themselves. It was no different from any other seed or fruit in the natural world. However, the chemical and mana composition inside the cacao beans created some sort of reaction within the orcs that allowed them to tap into the inherent strength and power hiding inside their very bodies. This was the reason why they treated cacao trees as their sacred ground. It was what gave them the strength to protect their territories from any harm. And if the taste of cacao beans were any less bitter, they would always be eating these as a snack, allowing them to be in a permanent state of strength and power. Unfortunately, these orcs hated its bitterness so much that they only ate it during emergencies or when they truly needed it. The chieftain closed his eyes and became thankful for the goddess' blessing. He squatted, with his thighs almost parallel to the ground. He slapped his thighs simultaneously, creating a rhythmic sound that reverberated throughout the forest of cacao trees. Boo! Two! The chieftain screamed to the top of his lungs. He began to slap his body harder and harder, showing off how resilient his body became because of the transformation brought on by the cacao beans. Boo! Two! And somehow, his voice began to resonate with the sounds created by his body. Each slap was supported and reinforced by earth mana coming out of the chieftain's body, before being transmitted out to the surroundings as sound waves. As the earth mana infused sound waves passed through the cacao trees, their branches began to sway as if they were hit with a gust of wind. The chieftain's ritual intensified, with the sound creating more and more swaying in the branches until finally, the trees themselves began to rock side to side, as if they were dancing. This ritual was how the orcs preserved their holy grounds. It was the reason how these cacao trees remained unperturbed while earthquakes devastated the entire forest. As each cacao tree swayed on the ground, its roots untangled themselves from the ground and made the soil very loose, allowing them to become flexible as the ground shook. The orcs felt as if their purpose in life was to protect the holy grounds and give thanks to the goddess. The Orcanine tribe believed that their ritual was the best way to preserve the cacao trees from any harm. By harshly slapping their bodies and creating booming sounds that reverberated through every tree, every root, and every leaf, they were able to impart their holy grounds with their mana, thereby completing the circle of life. But of course, the Orcupine tribe thought differently. Their ritual was completely different from theirs, choosing instead to strum the quills and spines on their bodies to create a sharp and rhythmic melody that imparted vibration to the trees. The Orcanine chieftain disliked this. After all, the vibrations brought on by the Orcupine tribe's ritual were too rough on the trees, making the trees shed too many leaves. Their way was much more delicate, making the trees sway gently. But if you were to ask the Orcupine chieftain, then he would say that Orcanines were too gentle. Their way of vibrating the trees may cause some leaves to shed excessively, but it was a small price to pay to get rid of any pests that were destroying the trees from the inside. Of course, each chieftain tribe had their own opinions, which led to the Civil War in the first place. To choose which one of them would get to stay and protect the holy grounds, each tribe tried to prove that their ritual was better than the other. This resulted in a standoff, with the Orcanine tribe on one side and the Orcupine tribe on the other, shouting and performing their rituals to try and overwhelm the other. It came to a point where their shouting competition became too much of a nuisance to those surrounding them, making birds fly outwards in search of somewhere quieter. This was still ongoing even now, and even the Orcanine chieftain was feeling its effects on their holy grounds. The cacao trees, which had been gently rocking back and forth to his ritual dance, suddenly stopped in place and began to vibrate. As it did so, leaves began to gently fall towards the chieftain's face, making his already angry face even more furious. There was only one person whose shouting could reach deep even through this territory. It was none other than the chieftain of the Orcupine tribe. A voice echoed, You've gotten impatient, huh, brother? The chieftain looked far into the forest, towards where the shrill noise of his rival was coming from. He had been so gentle with these trees, nurturing them from seedling to maturity, only for the cowardly Orcupine tribe to shake them vigorously without thought. Unbelievable. The Orcanine chieftain believed that these trees were sacred and should thus be treated as such. Yet, clearly, the Acropine chieftain thought differently. It is clear that we must be the only ones to protect our sacred trees. We shall show you our worthiness. He began to channel his inner strength, the very power given to him by the cacao beans. As he slapped his muscular thighs, a visible sound wave made out of concentrated earth mana resounded out into the forest. The two sound waves clashed in the air, with the Orcanine chieftain canceling the effects of his rival and taking back control of the cacao trees in his territory. They once again swayed gently in the wind. But of course, he wasn't done. The Orcupine chieftain tried to assert dominance on his territory. He wasn't going to take that lightly. It was now time for a counterattack. The Orcanine chief slapped his body even harder than before, shouting "Bu! Two! Two!" to transmit his ritual deep into his rival's territory. And somewhere on the other side of the forest, the Orcupine chieftain felt the cacao trees in his vicinity slowly sway in the wind, ceasing their vibration. "My brethren," he shouted to his fellow Orcupine orcs, "those foolish meatheads will not prevail in this war. We shall show them that our quills reign supreme." They began their counter-assault, strumming the spines on their body to fight off against the barbaric booming sounds of their rivals. This led to an escalation of the war, with both orc tribes shouting harder than ever to try and outbid the other. Their rituals resounded throughout the entire forest, as well as the neighboring territories beside it, including Neo-Orcus. Michael was watching the Rebornian engineers pour concrete into the pillars that would serve as the foundation for the structures, when all of a sudden he felt a disturbance in the air. He looked around and saw two different earth mana signatures coming from the forest, clashing against each other and creating a furious storm of mana that was heading in their very direction. Since these were merely sound waves imbued with a little bit of mana, it wasn't dangerous or anything, but it was quite loud. The locals of Neo-Orcus suddenly heard a high-pitched and a low-pitched sound grating on their ears. They covered their ears quickly and ducked down. This was not the first time that they heard this annoying sound that came from the forest. Although harmless, the sound would usually last a day or more, making their lives extremely miserable after hearing nothing but that screech in their ears. Beth covered the ears of one of the kids right next to her, choosing instead to help him instead of herself. She was going to endure the sound, but then silence. She looked around and saw a prismatic bubble wrapped around her body, completely muting her ears from the outside world. Beth wasn't the only one. Everyone around her was protected by this all-encompassing shield. This was none other than their inherent skill lesser unity defense they gained after Michael awakened their talent. "What's that sound?" Michael asked as he approached Beth. "That's the orcs," she said gravely. Una and her ogre battle made Agnes both approach Michael. "I've heard the orcs shout send reverberation to an entire battlefield. I realize now how loud it is." Even though Una and Agnes had no prismatic shield to protect them, they didn't seem to be too much affected by the deafening echoes of concentrated earth mana. Instead, Michael could see a concentration of fire mana gathering at the ears, essentially neutralizing the earth mana from the sound waves. What fascinated Michael was the fact that they didn't cast any spell to do that. It was a natural reaction from their bodies, the way a muscle tenses when hit by something hard. I guess that's one of the perks of training your body for physical arts, Michael thought to himself. After being distracted a little bit, Michael shook his head and concentrated on the problem at hand. "Have the orcs always been like this?" he asked Beth. She nodded, remembering the sleepless nights they endured while the sounds of the orcs' shouts echoed through the forest. That was one of the reasons why most of the inhabitants of the old Orcus town left to settle in a different area. They couldn't stand the noise. "Why?" Michael asked, which Beth had no answer for. They never bothered to find out because it would do them no good at all. They had no power to change things. Thankfully, Yuna held a lot of knowledge about orcs brought about by her training as a diplomat. I've heard that the orcs tend to turn on each other in harsh times. The two different clashing shouts are evidence of that. My guess is that the two orcs are battling it out for possession of the last resources in the forest, she explained. Michael looked to the horizon, towards the orc territory. They were affected by the earthquake too, he muttered. Yuna nodded. Yes, but the degradation of the Golden Road was what truly led the orcs to fall in hard times. According to the history books I read, these orcs used to find employment in the Golden Road as bodyguards for hire. They protected merchants and envoys in their journey, scaring off any unwanted troubles. That was how they earned enough money to buy food and resources to keep their hunger in check. And you know, orcs, they need a lot of sustenance to survive, mostly meat. And with the loss of the Golden Road, the orcs lost their source of income. My guess is that they then resorted to hunting in the forest for food. But with the earthquakes destroying and disturbing the ecosystem, they must have had trouble feeding both tribes. Michael appreciated Yuna's insight into the whole situation. We can certainly help them, Michael said. Is there any way that I can meet with the orcs? You want to recruit them? Yuna guessed. Yup. With our help, they don't need to fight it out with each other any longer. They could become part of the nation of Reborn and have all the food they could ever want. We still have a lot of meat in the fridge ready to give out. Neo Orcus wouldn't be the paradise he was hoping for if there were suffering orcs just beside them. Not only that, but with their previous jobs as bodyguards and escorts, Michael felt that the orcs could serve as good protectors of Neo Orcus. Although he was planning on sending a few Rebornian security centaurs here in the future, it would be good if they had their own security to begin with. There's a way to meet with them, and that is through meat, literally, Eunice said. I remember about that too, Beth interjected. She could recall hearing about this method when she was younger, when she was surrounded by merchants and peddlers. It's through giving the orcs a slab of meat with a flag staked through it, right? That's right, Yuna nodded. Orcs are quite intimidating, so people would ask for the services of the orcs by gifting them a piece of meat with a flag on it. The orcs would know to return to that place tomorrow morning to meet with their potential employer. Michael nodded, already planning in his mind. Thanks for telling me, he said to Yuna. Without you, I would have had to rely on Fudge's investigative skills. And you know Fudge. His opinion could be quite skewed to fit his ninja view of the world, he joked. The adorable but edgy slime popped out of Michael's shadow in protest. Master, I always give you an unbiased opinion. Really? Why didn't you tell me that you met Yuna? Michael asked, staring at the guilty Fudge. That's beside the point. Michael continued staring at the slime until finally, Miss Yuna, Master is bullying me. The supposed nonchalant ninja, Slime, hopped on over to Yuna's arms like a kid crying to his mom after being made fun of in the playground. There, don't mind him, Yuna said as she patted Fudge, consoling the cute little slime. You're doing a great job as a ninja. The little bratty slime quickly showed a warm smile at Yuna before turning around and flashing a tongue at Michael. You know, he's supposed to be my companion, he complained to Yuna. You should take care of him better then, she retorted teasingly. Otherwise, I'll snatch him right up. Michael chuckled and shook his head. By the way, Fudge, do you want to join us to meet with the orcs? I'll give you permission to stake around the perimeter like a ninja. Really? Fudge hopped back over to Michael's head as quickly as he left. It was that easy to placate the little slime, now acting as if nothing even happened. Master, don't worry. Those orcs won't see me, but I'll see all of them. I'll protect you. He won't need that, Jockus said, holding the hilt of his sword. I alone am enough. Count me in, Zion shouted. Me too, Amissa muttered under her breath. Lord Michael, we are at your service, Shiana bowed, with a smile forming on her face. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a couple of Orcanine tribe guards stood guarded near the entrance of their village. They were tasked to keep watch around their perimeter and make sure that those Orcupine orcs weren't anywhere near their territory. The two guards were busy having a great time slapping each other around as a sport, when all of a sudden, their noses perked up. There was a scent in the air, a scent they hadn't smelled in quite a long time. It was meat. It had been a few seasons ago since they caught a whiff of any deer or cows in the forest. The earthquakes caused a wide-scale migration from the forest, leading to a decrease in resources for the orcs whose main diet came from red meat. Yet now they were smelling blood in the air. Fresh blood. Fueled by their curiosity and their insatiable hunger for red meat, the two orc guards left their post and followed the scent in the air. It didn't take them long before they finally reached the edge of the forest, where a single slab of red meat was perfectly placed on top of a flat stone altar-like surface, with blood still pooling beside it. As the two orcs moved closer, they saw that a flag had been planted inside the meat, with a single gold letter symbol written on a white canvas. R. Even though it had been years since they saw this kind of offering, the two orc guards knew exactly what this flag meant. Someone was trying to contact them. They would have never thought that years after the dissolution of the Golden Road, someone would be contacting them again for their services. Even though it was weird, they knew that this was a chance for their tribe to earn resources that could help their tribe tremendously. They took the slab of meat and quickly returned to their tribe, alerting the rest of the Orcanine orcs as the smell of blood and meat emanated in everyone's nose as soon as they entered. Boo! Two! They screamed in excitement. It had been so long since they were graced with the presence of meat. And this excitement boiled over to more and more orcs, each one slapping their thighs and chest the same way they worshipped the cacao trees. It didn't take long before the Orcanine chieftain finally took notice of what was happening. He got out of his quarters and approached the two orc guards, who presented him with the meat and the flag planted inside it. Unfamiliar company, the chieftain muttered to himself. This flag emblem wasn't anything he remembered back in the glory days of the Golden Road. How long ago did you find this? The chieftain asked. Just a few slaps ago, chief, they answered. You have done a good job, the chieftain said. Not only did you bring this to my attention as soon as possible, you also prevented our rivals from hearing about such an opportunity. Good, he said. The Orcanines prided themselves in their sense of smells, which came from their half-wolf side. It would have taken the Orcupine tribe the whole day before they found the meat flag. But because of the fast action of his guards, the Orcupine would have no opportunity to learn about this business deal. If they played this right, they could monopolize all the rewards for this mission, giving them enough resources to finally tip the scales in their favor. This was the chance he was waiting for to finally exile those Orcupines. He then turned to his other attendants. Prepare our very best negotiator to meet with the merchant tomorrow morning. Make sure that you show no sign of this happening to those Orcupines. The rest of the orcs shouted in excitement, agreeing with their chief's orders. The prospect of finally eating meat gave them such a rush that they ended up performing their rituals till nighttime. Boo! Two. The next morning, a group of 4 Orcanine orcs set out to the edges of the forest, toward where they found the meat in the first place. Their excitement was palpable, with their ears perked up and their tails wagging side to side. But as they got closer and closer to the place, a mix of scents assaulted their noses. There were a couple of humans in the mix, with a bunch of other unknown species that they had never met before. But that wasn't what displeased them. It was the fact that they smelled the scent of those extremely familiar to them. As they finally reached the meeting place, their fears were finally confirmed. The Orcupine tribe was also in the meeting place. They, too, sent an envoy of 4 orcs to negotiate with the humans waiting on the other side of the forest. As soon as the 2 orc tribes caught sight of each other, their fury and anger flared up like a volcano, almost resulting in them facing off in another shouting match. But their chieftain's words resounded in their heads and kept them cool. Their hatred for the Orcupine tribe had to wait. Right now, the main objective was to meet with their potential employers and vie for their favor. The 2 orc tribes approached Michael's group while eyeing each other carefully. We, the Orcanine tribe, meet with the human merchant. We offer you our unstoppable strength, they shouted in pride, looking over at their rival in provocation. We are the Orcupine tribe, and unlike these meatheads, we will offer you unyielding protection. There is no better defense than us, they retorted back, flaring their quills and spines at their rivals. Meathead, you take that back. You are cowards. Cowards? Why you? The two orc tribes were already in a screaming match, presenting themselves to Michael in an attempt to curry his favor. They must have forgotten that Michael wasn't an orc like them and just tried to impress him by slapping their thighs or strumming their quills. It was a weird sight, although it was nice to see that the orcs were already receptive to his attempts to make contact with them. He didn't like the fact that the two orc tribes were so hostile against each other. He could practically cut the tension with a knife. Don't trust these cowards, human. They do nothing but hunker themselves in one place and present their spikes, the Orcanine guard said. These orcs are so stupid that they don't understand the importance of a good defense, the Orcupines retorted back. Meanwhile, the Dragonborns looked at the orcs and couldn't understand their hatred for one another. For them, family was everything. Why don't they just work together? Zion asked innocently. That's just the way of orcs. They're quite passionate, Eunice said. Michael, who will you choose to hire? I must warn you that choosing one side might anger the other. Both. I can't leave one to fend for themselves, Michael replied. After observing these two orcs with his own eyes, ChatJK3 was able to give him a little bit more information about them. Orcanine orcs, half-orc, half-canine hybrid. Type, demi-human. Difficulty, element, earth, fire. These orcs, Orcupine orcs, half-orc, half-porcupine hybrid. Type, demi-human. Difficulty, element, earth, water. What do you think about these orcs? Michael asked ChatJK3. These orcs are extremely good at one thing, but bad at another. They would serve as a good addition to the nation if they worked together. It would be an extreme waste if Michael allied with only one tribe. He could see the Orcanines and the Orcupines working together to safeguard Neo-Orcus and subsequently the Golden Road as well. He needed to find a way to reconcile these two orc tribes, or else it would get harder for him to execute his plans. It would be an extremely unpopular destination spot for anyone if there was incessant shouting coming from the forest every single day. Even he wouldn't want to live in Neo-Orcus town if that happened. The best way that he thought of to make these two tribes see eye to eye was to solve the problem they were having in the first place. According to Una, their reason for their civil war was probably a lack of resources. So, the solution was easy. Give them food. Orcs, listen to me, Michael said, embedding his voice with earth mana similar to the orcs' way of performing their rituals. Except his way was much more refined, with earth mana condensed into the very air molecules that transmitted the sound. This elicited a strong reaction from the orcs, feeling as if their very soul was shaken by Michael's voice. The orcs immediately shut up and stood straight, looking at Michael with reverence and a little bit of fear in their eyes. It felt like they were in the presence of none other than their chieftains. Michael's booming voice activated a built-in instinct within the orcs, treating Michael as if his words had authority. After all, in their culture, those who could make their voice boom would be able to protect their holy grounds better and therefore connect better with the earth goddess herself. That was the whole reason why the two tribes were trying to settle their grudge through a competition of rituals. For a second, the two groups stopped fighting and looked at Michael and did exactly as he said. They listened. We are willing to provide you food and water for as long as your two tribes stop your civil war. It's too noisy, Michael said. You don't have to fight for resources. We can give meat. Michael gave a signal over to Jakku and Zion, who quickly picked up a huge wooden crate and dropped it right in front of the orcs. Just from a scent alone, the orcs knew it was meat. Red meat. The Dragonborns opened the crate, letting the orcs see the goods they could receive every week if they agreed with Michael's proposition. The Orcanines looked at the fresh meat in front of their eyes and almost salivated at the sight. Human, you can call me Michael. Human Michael, the Orcanine guard said. We are willing to do as you say. We are willing to offer you our might in eradicating anyone that offends you. Of course, the Orcupines couldn't stand still and let their rivals take away such a generous patron. Our whole tribe is willing to protect you and your company for life, they promised. Both tribes realized the importance of being in Michael's favor. So, the orcs did what they were familiar with. They competed against each other. The Orcanines immediately made a counteroffer. No, But before the orcs got carried away with their rivalry, Shiina quickly put a stop to it. There's no need for that. Lord Michael has all the protection that he will ever need, she said with a smile. Yet her eyes showed a sharpness to it that sent a chill down the orc spines. It was only now that they realized the presence of the Dragonborns. Their appearance was already intimidating as it is, but the orcs felt that their connection to the Earth Goddess was much stronger than theirs. This meant only one thing for the orcs. Don't mess with the human and dragon-like beings accompanying him. I told you, there's no need for competition. Your tribes can stop your civil war, or else I'll have to stop it myself, Michael said. The orcs looked apologetic. I'm sorry, human Michael, but our grudge against these orcupines cannot be solved so easily. That is right. We cannot promise that we will have peace, but we will try. Yuna tapped Michael's shoulder and whispered in his ears. They're just regular orcs. They can't do anything. You need to meet with their chieftains to make any significant headway in your peace plan. Michael nodded, agreeing with Yuna's assessment. Tell your chieftains that I want to meet with them. We have business to discuss, he told them. The OCS looked at each other, then back to Michael, before meekly nodding their heads. We will relay this to our chieftain, the orcs said before carrying the crate of meat back to their respective villages. But unbeknownst to them, their shadows seemed to lengthen and contract in unnatural ways. Fudge had successfully infiltrated the orcs with his clones. As the Acronine orcs returned to their villages, they were immediately welcomed by an applause of thigh-slapping intensity. Even though they hadn't seen what was inside the crate as of yet, their noses told them everything they needed to know. Boo. Two. Was it successful? Their fellow orcs asked expectantly. But instead of seeing joy and excitement, the orcs showed an awkward expression. After bringing back a crate full of meat, everyone thought they had won over the merchant's favor and gained employment. They thought that they had successfully pulled one over the Orcupine tribe. Chieftain, the orcs cried out as they saw their leader come out of his tent. What is it? The chieftain asked after seeing the look on their faces. This was not the look of accomplishment, but strangely, it wasn't that of loss either. We met with the human merchant. The orcs began to explain to their chieftain about their meeting with Michael, and how their rival Orcupines somehow caught wind of the meeting and crashed it earlier than them. Let me get this straight. The human will give us meat and water for doing nothing? He is asking for peace, the chieftain asked. Yes, the orc answered. They are probably from Orcus Town, the chieftain guessed. It was not hard to guess the reason why the humans were asking for them to stop their civil war. After all, their feud had been affecting the whole forest as of late, especially with the Orcupine chieftain being a lot bolder during his recent rituals. He is asking for nothing else? The chieftain tried to clarify. He is willing to give us precious meat without anything in return. The reason why the chieftain found this hard to believe was because they had scoured every area in the forest and overturned any rock, but they still hadn't found any prey to hunt. He guessed that the humans in Orcus Town wouldn't have been able to as well. This meant that food was a very rare resource, especially red meat. Yet somehow, this Michael human had the capacity to share crates of meat with them for free. And it wasn't just them. Michael was also willing to offer the same resource to the Orcupine tribe. Reborn. The chieftain pondered as he looked at the Reborn company symbol painted on the crate. I have never heard of them before. What does he look like? A human boy with gold hair. He had dragons by his side. The orcs reported the 4 dragonborns, with their description being a little bit exaggerated than reality. They seem to have remembered the dragonborns being a lot scarier than how they actually were. Jaka became a dangerous warrior with his hands always sitting squarely on the hilt of his sword, ready to cut down anything in his path. Shiina was remembered as a scary white dragon who looked like she could kill someone with a single glare. The orcs didn't remember much about Amisu, and only remembered feeling as if they were being watched intensely by a hidden presence. Strangely, they remembered Zion as the energetic brat that he had always been. The rest of the orcs, listening in on their conversation, gasped as they pictured the dragonborns. They had heard tales of dragons from their ancestors, but never yet met them personally. This made them wary of the human who could tame the dragons to do his bidding. They were connected with the goddess. Most of all was that human. He was able to use the voice, they said, remembering Michael's soul-shaking words. The chieftain eyed the orcs questioningly. The human boy was able to do that. It seemed that the chieftain had been underestimating the human. He thought that Michael was a simple merchant in need of a sword for hire. But from how his orcs described Michael and his attendants, it seemed that he came from a very powerful and influential company with no need for a warrior. And there was only one reason why a company of Reborn's caliber would have any business in Orcus Town. Has the Golden Road been re-established? The chieftain muttered to himself. If this Reborn company had the resources to transport meat to Orcus Town, then it was wholly indicative of their power. Not even the companies he remembered back in the glory days of the Golden Road could navigate through the destroyed forests around Orcus Town. And the only reason why such a company of this magnitude would set its sights on Orcus Town was nothing less than the prospects of the Golden Road. Chief, he wants to meet with you. He is asking for both tribes' cooperation. The orcs relayed Michael's words. There was no reason to reject Michael's proposal. After all, this would solve the starvation problem in their village. Yet, he knew that total peace between the two tribes was nigh impossible to pull off. He had a grudge with the chieftain of the Orcupines, and that could not be solved through words alone. Their grudge had escalated for far too long. But for now, the Orcanine chieftain would be willing to enter a truce with a rival tribe. The Orcupine chieftain would probably agree to this too, as the rewards for Michael's proposal were simply far too alluring. Let us celebrate and have a feast, the chieftain shouted to his village. Our benefactor has given us meat to indulge ourselves with, and indulge we will. Boo, two, boo, two, boo, two. In their celebrations, the Orcanine orcs slapped their thighs and gave thanks to the goddess once again, directing their ritual towards their holy grounds. The cacao trees swayed back and forth to the celebrations of the Orcanine tribe as they began to grill and smoke all the meat from the crate. Meanwhile, a sneakily little shadow kept jumping from one orc to the other, spreading its clones throughout the whole Orcanine population. Every time Michael met a new group or species, Fudge always liked to spread his clones to their shadows and survey their every move. After all, it was what a good ninja would do. And as he kept wandering from orc to orc, Fudge suddenly came across their holy grounds, the place filled with 1,000 pristine cacao trees, each one bearing mature fruit. That's chocolate. Miss Yuna and Master will love this. Meanwhile, a large number of Rebornians finally arrived in Neo-Orcus with the express intent of helping reconstruct and rejuvenate the new territory of the nation of Reborn. They helped with the construction of houses, the installation of the sewer and plumbing system, as well as turning the whole road system into concrete. Michael also planned on connecting the railroad system and the electric system sometime in the future, but the steam turbine back in the King's region was still an ongoing construction project. But he made sure to include electrical systems and outlets in the houses to prepare for the eventual connection of lines. Things slowed down in Neo-Orcus now that there were actual professional Rebornians on the projects. It also helped that everyone had been more productive with the clear absence of orcs shouting in the distance. This left Michael and the Dragonborns out of something to do in the meantime. So, the Dragonborns brought baseball into Neo-Orcus. A satisfying ding echoed into the forest as Zion knocked the ball right out of the park and into the forest. A catfolk demi-human tried to jump and catch the ball flying up toward her, but was unable to coordinate her hands with her eyes, letting the ball pass right through her hands. Jaku, Shiina, and Amisu casually rounded out the bases, giving their brother a high five at home plate. Yeah, Zion screamed. Do you see that, little bros? The little kids watching on the sidelines cheered and shouted at their idol. The children have taken quite a liking to the youngest Dragonborn because he acted like one himself. That chocolate's mine, Zion declared. I'm sorry, Sir Zion, but my mistress wants that for herself, Agnes said as she readied herself to bat in the next inning. With the limited supply of cacao in the forests, Michael could only create a few bars of chocolate for everyone to enjoy. And since they had free time anyway, the Dragonborns, mostly Zion, suggested that they play baseball to determine which team would get the chocolates. It was Yuna and her demi-human escorts versus the Dragonborns and the Rebornians. Yuna already knew how to play baseball. Michael even remembered her going on a variety show to play a couple of games. With her and Agnes' talents in physical arts, they were able to quickly pick up the proper skills to go against the Dragonborns. It was as easy as slicing ahead, Agnes even said. There were also a couple of Neo-Orcus locals who came to watch, and they too were intrigued with the game of baseball. Unfortunately, Michael wasn't allowed to join in their game. Something about it being too unfair or something, which was kind of true. After all, he didn't even have to hit the ball if he wanted to score a home run. He ended up enjoying the game on the sidelines, which was nice in and of itself. "Fudge, are you there?" Michael talked to the shadow beneath his feet. There was no answer. Usually, the cute little slime will be the first one to compete for a chance to have the last remaining chocolate bars, but he was strangely quiet recently. He wasn't even pestering Yuna for pets or anything. All of this started after they met with the orcs, which Michael found a bit suspicious. Where the hell is that slime? Meanwhile, the Orcanine chieftain visited the holy grounds once again to give his thanks to the goddess. Just as the Reborn company promised, they were given a shipment of red meat and other fresh resources in exchange for the temporary truce between the two tribes. There were still a few instances where the two tribes would encounter each other in the forest, but it would only end in little spats and wouldn't escalate into a full-blown shouting match like before. This led the tribe to become noticeably a lot happier. The lack of competition against the other tribes meant that they could focus on their own family and build more descendants. It would be ideal if this situation continued in the future, which was why their upcoming meeting with the owner of the Reborn company was a very important time for both tribes. The Orcanine chieftain wanted to communicate with the goddess and ask her for her guidance in the meeting. After all, the chieftain believed that it was her who pushed the Reborn company and their tribe to meet with each other, leading to this win-win conclusion for both parties. But unbeknownst to the Orcanine chieftain, there was a mischievous little shadow beneath his feet who was watching everything he was doing. So many cacao trees. So many chocolates. Fudge thought to himself. He had also infiltrated the Orcupine tribe and its chieftain and confirmed that they too were in possession of hundreds of viable cacao trees ready for the picking. Should I tell Master about this? Fudge was just about to return to Michael's side when he suddenly had an idea. What if I help Master? What if I'm the one who helps Master get all the cacao seeds he needs to make mountains of chocolate? Maybe he'll give me a lot. A vision of him swimming in a sea of chocolate bars flashed in Fudge's mind, eating all the chocolate that could fit in his mouth and getting tons of compliments from his masters. "I'll give you thousands of pets." Yuna would say, "You're the best ninja," his master would say. With this idea in mind, the mischievous ninja, Slime, moved out of the shadows and inhabited one of the trees in front of the chieftain. Hiss! The chieftain was startled as he suddenly felt the presence of something unknown in their sacred lands. "Who's there?" he asked carefully. Out of the corner of his eyes, he suddenly saw something slithering across a branch. It was something thin and scaly. He turned his head and saw a single snake with red eyes and green scales like that of a dragon, staring back at him. There was only one conclusion the chieftain could come to. "An envoy from the goddess?" he proclaimed. The chieftain's ancestors believed that their sacred grounds were sacred for a reason. It was a place that only the goddess could touch, and they, as its protectors, were the only ones granted access to this place. The fact that no one had ever seen a single animal inside their sacred grounds in the entire history of the Orcanine tribe was proof of that. No bird made its nest in the cacao trees, and no squirrels burrowed in the trees. The only living beings in this forest were those who were a part of the life cycle of the cacao trees themselves. There weren't supposed to be any snakes in this area. The goddess wouldn't permit it. Therefore, the chieftain could only conclude that this was not a normal snake. Its intelligent red eyes showed consciousness unlike that of a wild animal. The fact that this snake appeared in perfect timing just as he was about to ask the goddess for her input and guidance made him think that this was made by divine intervention. It all made sense for the chieftain. He was beginning to think that the Reborn Company was an envoy from the Earth Goddess herself, treating the meat and resources they gave as literal heaven sent. Therefore, the only conclusion he could come to was that this snake was an agent from heaven itself. "I bow in the presence of the divine," the chieftain said as he kneeled towards the green snake. Meanwhile, Fudge was relishing the fact that his illusion had gone so smoothly that he didn't even need any effort to convince the orc of anything. Yeah, bow he," Fudge said smugly, with the snake tongue hissing in happiness. "The goddess must have sensed my worries and sent you to alleviate my concerns. Am I right?" the chieftain asked expectantly. "Humu, that is right. Tell this good snake, about your problems." The Orcanine chieftain breathed a sigh of relief and began to spill his thoughts on the upcoming meeting with the human owner of the Reborn Company. After all, it was more than probable that the chieftain of the Orcupine tribe would also be present in the meeting, seeing as the Reborn Company also made an agreement with them. "I'm simply worried that my grudge against my old rival will prevail against my better judgment. I want to preserve our good graces with the humans, but I am afraid that I will want to bring up old grudges once I meet with my enemy face to face." The rivalry between the two chieftains was personal and ran deep in their history. Humu, Fudge muttered, nodding his snake head. "I think that competition and rivalry are healthy and needed." The chieftain looked up at the snake. "Is that so?" "Yes, absolutely. You need to compete against the Orcupine tribe to see which one of you is the best at showing your love for the Reborn Company." "Channeling my hate for my rival into gifts?" the chieftain muttered, his eyes flickering as he thought of many scenarios. "In your meeting with the awesome leader of the Reborn Company and the good ninja by his side, you should try your best to be friends with them. That way, you can be sure that your tribe will be blessed rather than your rivals." The chieftain's eyes widened as if he had just realized something. "You're right. If the Earth Goddess had planned for our tribe and the Reborn Company to meet, then it must mean that whoever gains their support will also be blessed by the goddess." But he remembered that their tribe had nothing to offer. "We have no gifts to give except our service," the chieftain said. Fudge's eyes glimmered. "Well, you do have something. This." The snake slithered up towards one of the trees and wrapped its tail towards one of the mature cacao fruits hanging on the branch. "You can give them chocolate beans." "Chocolate? Cacao beans." Fudge quickly corrected himself. A doubtful look passed on the chieftain's face. "I do not think humans would appreciate cacao beans. They serve no effect for them other than bitterness." "Don't worry about that," Fudge assured. "Just make sure to stock a lot of cacao beans and present them as a gift." The Orcanine chieftain, though a little bit skeptical, was willing to try it out. After all, they had quite an abundance of cacao beans that would only spoil in their warehouses if not used. "All right, we shall prove to the goddess that only we deserve her blessings. I thank you for giving me this advantage," the chieftain said, determined to beat the Orcupine tribe using the gift method. Of course. Unknown to the Orcanine chieftain, his very rival was also being visited by a stranger who presented himself as a snake envoy from the Earth Goddess. "Cacao beans, you say? Then I shall do as you guide me. If it will help me best my rival, then I will give the Reborn Company as much cacao beans as we can give," the Orcupine chieftain said, flaring his quills in excitement. Both chieftains instructed their attendants to harvest as many beans from their sacred ground in preparation. They smiled, thinking that they were the only ones given knowledge from the envoy of the goddess. They didn't know they were getting playing right in the hands of the mischievous slime, who was already imagining himself eating hundreds of chocolate bars by himself, with the Dragonborns looking on enviously at him. Fudge popped up right in front of Michael's shadow and acted like nothing happened. "Where did you go?" Michael asked. It had been a few days since the usually talkative slime disappeared. "Master, I want 100 chocolate bars, okay?" Fudge said, giggling and unable to hide his excitement. "What are you talking about?" Just then, Michael heard a knock on his door. Shiina entered the room and bowed towards Michael. "The orcs have arrived, sir, and they seem to be carrying something with them." Michael walked out of his house and saw the locals of Neo Orcus carefully watching the entrance gates as a group of 5 Orcanine orcs waited on the edge of the forest. This would be the first time they would set their sights on the orcs that had been giving them tinnitus for quite a while. The adults regarded them with a little bit more reservation and caution, while the kids excitedly peeked around the walls to see new demi-humans. If it weren't for the Rebornians and the Dragonborns by their side, the locals would be a lot more intimidated by them. "What's going on?" Michael asked the Dragonborns. Zion peeked above the walls like the other children. "I was teaching my juniors how to play baseball when I sensed them approaching, Bro Mike." "YWN, I sense them too," Jacques said, stretching his arms lazily. "I smell chocolate," Amissa muttered under her breath. Michael looked at the orcs with his supreme skill, observing the very mana in their bodies. "None of them is the leader," he commented. There was no standout orc that he would expect to be their leader. Yuna walked beside Michael and nodded her head. Orc chieftains have a much more defined muscle structure and a decorated mane around their necks. They must be here for some other reason. Michael thought they were here to finally set the meeting for the orc chieftains, but judging by the absence of the other tribe, it looked like they had another agenda for this visit. He walked forward, with the orcs standing at attention upon seeing him approach. Once he was closer, the OCS recognized his youthful face and golden hair. Most of all, just like the other orcs said, the human owner of Reborn had an intense appeal of mana, as every piece of the element on Earth was sucked towards his body like a magnet. They began slapping their thighs and chests in synchronicity to display their respect for Michael. "Boo. Two. We, the Orcanine tribe, present these gifts to the Reborn Company as a token of our gratitude." The orcs put down the large sacks onto the ground, and each one was almost twice as big as their bodies. It landed on the ground with a thud, making everyone quite curious as to what the orcs considered a gift. Michael, with his enhanced senses and his affinity to all elements, could sense the earth mana emanating from those sacks. Their smell was something familiar too. "Is that?" "Yes. Those are large amounts of cacao beans." ChatJK3 confirmed. The orcs ripped open one of the sacks and showed him the thousands upon thousands of white cacao beans inside ready for the taking. "You're giving me these?" Michael asked. The orcs slapped their thighs with a resounding, "Yes, human. Our chieftain is showing his goodwill for you and your Reborn Company for all the meat and resources that you gave us." Michael picked one of the beans and inspected it, verifying that it was indeed cacao beans that he was familiar with. "How did you get so many?" he asked them curiously. Even when he scoured the forest for any remaining beans, he only saw a few handfuls at a time. Yet, these orcs were able to hand out about 100 kilos in just one sack alone. Cacao beans had an expiration date, which meant that these couldn't have been in their storage for long. "That's from their sacred grounds, Master." Fudge suddenly popped up out of Michael's shadow and excitedly explained. "Sacred grounds? How did you know that?" Michael questioned, eyeing the ninja slime suspiciously. "Oh, he was the only response Fudge could make before he immediately returned to Michael's shadow. The orcs slapped their thighs once again, showing Michael his due respect. "We will be back to deliver more in the future. Our chieftain wants you to think of it as nothing more than a gift, and hopes that you will think kindly of our tribe." "Boo. Two. Michael half-heartedly copied their actions and slapped his thighs. "Boo. Two." His attempt at honoring their rituals and their customs put a big smile on the orcs' faces before they retreated back into the forest. With the orcs gone, the Dragonborns and the kids crowded over the sacks of cacao beans with excitement written all over their faces. "Sir Michael, does this mean you can make more chocolate?" "Yes. This whole sack is mine, right, Bro Mike?" Zion said, already taking a sack for himself. "Try it out. See what will happen," Shiana warned, her eyes already making Zion feel like he was being pierced by 1,000 needles. "That belongs to Lord Michael. He decides who he gives it to, preferably someone who works hard, like me." The rest of them began to clamor for Michael to make more chocolate, which he was planning on doing since they got so many cacao beans this time. However, before he did that, Michael looked over at his shadow with a serious eye. "Fudge, sacred grounds? How did you know that?" His shadow remained silent. Before Michael could ask for more, he suddenly felt another presence approaching them from the other side of the forest. About a minute later, the sounds of heavy footsteps entered everyone's ears. It was the orcs. Again, but this time they were of a different kind. Instead of their thick mane, these orcs had spines and quills spread all over their body. It was the Orcupine tribe. Ra, ta, th, they said, thrumming their quills to create a rattling sound. We, the Oripin tribe, present these gifts to the Reborn company as a token of our gratitude. Their words were all too familiar. And just like the Orcanine tribe, these orcs were dragging large and heavy sacks of what Michael could only describe as extremely similar to what the Orcanine tribe had. It was easy to guess what they had brought with them as a gift. They plopped down it in front of Michael and performed their ritual of thanks. We hope that you enjoy the fruits of our sacred grounds. We will be giving you more in the future, so our chieftain hopes that you look at our village in a good light. Although Michael was glad that he came into possession of hundreds of kilos of cacao beans, he was still clueless as to how it all happened. He thought that cacao beans were already nearing their extinction with the current landscape caused by the recent earthquakes, but it seemed as if the orcs had their own plantation that could harbor plenty of cacao seeds for them to harvest. Michael watched as the Orcupine tribe returned to their side of the forest with only one thing bugging his mind. Fudge, I think I deserve an explanation here. A violet blob emerged victoriously from the shadows. He had his blobby hands on his non-existent waist, with his non-existent chin raised high as if waiting for the upcoming praises from Michael. Hee master, I was able to spread my clones to the orcs when I saw them at the meeting. Fudge began to describe his heroic and a little bit exaggerated story of how he infiltrated the tribes and manipulated them from the inside. He even weaved in a few stories about how he skillfully avoided being caught a few times, being a good ninja, and all that. Michael listened and finally learned about the orcs' sacred grounds. Why do they have so many cacao beans? Michael asked, but Fudge, being too excited about his reward of chocolates, didn't pay much attention to why the orcs treated cacao beans with such high regard, even calling it their sacred grounds. Chat JK3, does their diet consist mainly of cacao beans? Is highly unlikely. There is not enough nutritional value in cacao beans for them to sustain their large stature. However, there is not enough evidence to fully prove this. It is best to awaken one of their talents for the software to fully comprehend the physiology of the orcs and their correlation to cacao beans. There's also a large possibility of learning lots of physical arts from the orcs, as it is what they mainly use on a day-to-day basis. Michael didn't want to awaken their talent before he fully solved their civil war and integrated them into the nation of Reborn. So, ChatJK3's suggestion would have to wait for a little bit. How did I do, master? Am I a good ninja? Fudge closed his eyes and waited for the showering of praise and love from Michael. Yet a few seconds passed, and there was only silence from his master. A master? So let me get this straight. The reason why the orc tribes are giving me cacao beans is because you goaded them into competing against each other. Yup, Fudge said proudly. You did this knowing that I wanted them to make peace with each other and end their civil war? Nope. The ninja slime, upon realizing that he may have inadvertently made the two tribes hostile against each other again, looked depressed. Did Fudge do bad? A large gust of air puffed out of Fudge, slowly deflating into a puddle of violet water. Michael chuckled and patted the little guy. How could he get mad at his cute pet? Nah, you did fine, he consoled Fudge. You helped me out a ton by giving us more cacao beans to make chocolate with. Your method is a little bit shady, but either way, good job, buddy. Fudge slowly gained shape again, being filled solely from Michael's praises. Really? Yup. And now that you've gained the trust of the orcs, I want you to spy on them and find out why they have such a huge grudge against each other. You're the only one who can do this, so I'm counting on you, okay? The violet slime jumped up and quickly transformed into his ninja outfit in midair. Of course, master. Thy will be done, Fudge said hoarsely, creating a serious atmosphere for himself. His turnaround was so quick that many would think his previous depressed state was nothing more than a lie for pity points. Fudge quickly returned to Michael's shadow and continued his ninja missions. Meanwhile, Michael had the Dragonborns move the cacao beans inside Neo Orcus, where he could process the cacao beans into chocolate. Many locals and Rebornians gathered at the center of their town to watch Michael process the bitter cacao beans into the sugary sweetness of chocolate. Michael did this publicly because he wanted to teach the locals of Neo Orcus how to make chocolate of their own in the future. After all, he was planning on making this the primary exported product from this town. It would give Beth and others a chance for their talents to shine. After all, chocolate was a flexible ingredient that could be added to any food, either cake, bread, or even water. The business possibilities of chocolate were endless. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the forest, deeper into the Queen's region, there was a gathering of a few peddlers carrying large rucksacks on their backs. These were the very same peddlers who had run away at the sound of the orcs' ritual shouting against each other. Although they were scared to death from the potential threat of the orcs, as well as the dangerous terrain ahead of them, these peddlers decided to come back and risk their lives to help the poor inhabitants of Orcus Town from starvation. As peddlers, they were the only ones who could supply Orcus Town with enough food to last for at least another month. If they didn't come back, then they would be leaving Orcus Town to die on their own. They couldn't leave that on their conscience. So they came back, and miraculously, the shouting from the orcs seemed to have stopped. Even as they traveled deeper into the forest, there was no sign of shrieking and taunting echoing in their ears. They're gone. This is our chance. We must help Orcus Town. This gave them the courage to go deeper into the forest until finally they came across the territory known as Orcus Town. Yet, as they came closer, they noticed that something was wrong. Orcus Town was too busy. Michael raised his hand and levitated the cacao beans from the sack before using ember spell to roast them right in front of everyone's eyes. The children's eyes glazed with amazement as Michael then cracked these beans to reveal a dark nib with a similar smell to the chocolate they were all so familiar with. And with the cacao nibs gathered in one place, Michael destroyed their very chemical structure and turned them into a liquid with a smooth texture and flavor. It didn't take long before the liquid ball of pure chocolate hardened into bite-sized pieces for everyone to enjoy. Yee, gimme, so good. Zion and the children jumped up to try and catch the chocolate raining from the sky. But Jaku simply opened his palm and let one fall right into his palms. Meanwhile, Umisu and Shiina sharply snatched pieces from the air without anyone noticing. Yuna and her demi-human escorts were given one as well, and they enjoyed it more than any other royal candy or snack famous in the Queen's region. Michael had distributed the chocolate pieces equally, but left a few for himself. He had other plans for these. While everyone snacked on the pure and sweet chocolatey goodness of the processed cacao beans, Michael walked over to Beth and requested her help. "There's a recipe that I want you to try out. Can you make it?" he asked her. Beth's talent was baking, and Michael knew that there were a lot of recipes from his old world that were only enhanced by the addition of chocolate. The best example of that was none other than chocolate chip cookies. Michael whispered the recipe he got from ChatJK3, with Beth slowly nodding her head as she began to realize the potential of such a product. "Leave it to me, Michael," she said, putting on her apron. "I will make cookies." She returned to her bakery and began preparations. Michael gave her all the necessary ingredients, such as eggs, flour, and other such necessities, which meant that all she had to do was to put it all together. Even though techniques like whisking and folding were new to her, her natural talents in baking came through, and she was able to perform them quite well despite it being her first time. When she put the dough into the oven, she didn't even need a timer for her to know that it was done. As soon as the rich aroma wafted through her nose, she knew that it had finished cooking. She took the tray out of her oven and was greeted with the mouth-watering sight of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. She hardly believed that it was something that she made. She took one out and took a bite. It was soft and chewy on the inside, while still having a crisp outer layer. And as soon as she bit into one of the chocolate chips embedded into the bread, a rich mixture flooded her taste. Michael couldn't wait and took one for himself. And the taste immediately brought him back to his previous life, when his parents gifted him cookies on his birthday. "Michael boy, this cookie is so good." right? Despite wanting to eat more, Beth immediately cooked up another batch of cookies, knowing that the kids and the locals of Neo Orcus would want more once they got a taste of the cookies. And as she did, the fresh smell of cookies wafted over the whole territory, making people curious as to what Beth was cooking up at her bakery. Lord Michael, we smelled something from here. Shiana knocked and opened the door to the bakery. She tried to act serious, but her eyes kept wandering over to the freshly baked cookies on the tabletop. Shiana, you're just in time. Tell everybody that the cookies are done. Here, have one. Michael tossed her a cookie. She regarded it curiously before taking a bite. And as soon as she did, her white scales began turning pink, a sign of her getting flustered. She immediately left the room, not wanting Michael to see her in such an embarrassing state. But before she could take another bite from the amazing cookies, Jocko snatched it right out of her hands and finished it himself. Good. You. As the two Dragonborn siblings fought, more and more people began entering the bakery and leaving with huge grins on their faces while nibbling on their chocolate chip cookies. It didn't take long before everyone in Neo Orcus was snacking on cookies for the whole day. Thankfully, there were a few other bakers/chefs who helped Beth deal with the demand for cookies, especially from Zion and his little minions. The next day, Shiana once again knocked on Michael's door to alert him of a new presence in town. Lord Michael, we have new visitors. Michael groggily woke up and opened his supreme skill, Unity Gathering. He thought it would be another shipment from the orcs, but as he focused on the light energy on their bodies, Michael realized that they were humans. He got off his bed and welcomed the new strangers in their midst. Meanwhile, the peddlers stopped just a few steps away from entering the walls of Neo Orcus. Their jaws were dropped, with confusion and shock written all over their faces. This is not Orcus Town. It's supposed to be, the veteran peddler replied. Instead of seeing the run-down town with degraded walls and buildings, the peddlers were seeing something completely different. They saw new white walls surrounding the territory, in pristine condition and in even better quality than any of them expected. Not only that, but the roads here, despite still being under construction, showed signs of being even better than stone roads in the capital cities of the Queen's region. The whole of Orcus Town was lively, with people and demi-humans working side by side as they poured their blood, sweat, and tears into rebuilding the town in better condition. In their dazedness, they saw a strange dragon-like demi-human approach them with a brown circular thing in his hands. Yo, want a cookie? Excuse me, is this Orcus Town? They asked the demi-human cautiously. Zion pondered. No, this place is called Neo Orcus. Ah, so we were wrong. No, wait, that's right. Neo Orcus used to be called Orcus Town before we arrived here, Zion said, nibbling on his cookie casually, not knowing he almost caused a huge misunderstanding. The peddlers whispered to themselves, shocked at the revelation. They couldn't believe it. Literally. Are you sure? This looks completely different from what I remember, the veteran peddler said. He was part of the elder generation that still remembered the good old days of the Golden Road. This was not the Orcus Town he remembered. You guys want to see for yourself? Zion said in a dare, inviting them in to prove them wrong. The peddlers looked at each other and slowly walked forward. They stepped foot onto the half-finished concrete road, surprised at its solidness despite it being so flat. It looked like they had used a really big slab of stone. The streets, although still under construction, were designed with brilliant architecture, complete drains, and curbs. There was even a weird pole at the end of every street that looked like it had green, orange, and red glasses on the top. What's that? They asked Zion. That's a stoplight. But you won't understand that yet. They continued to walk through the streets until they saw large metal pipes getting levitated by demi-humans and being installed inside houses under construction. As they connected underground, these pipes suddenly burst out with a spray of blue clear water before the demi-humans twisted a lever and stopped the flow. Water? I thought Orcus Town only got theirs from rain. This is weird. Just then, a human came over to the demi-human workers and gave them a box containing meat and vegetables still smoking just a few minutes after being cooked. Here's your food, the humans said, and the demi-humans thanked her in turn. One of the peddlers finally couldn't hide his curiosity any longer and confronted the woman. "Excuse me, but how does this place have food and water? Orcus Town was supposed to be under starvation and dehydration, but it looks like everyone here is well-fed and healthy." The woman nodded and sighed in relief. "We were supposed to, but thankfully, the Reborn Company saved us from that terrible fate." Reborn Company. The peddlers muttered under their breaths. Business was supposed to be their bread and butter, their specialty. Yet, they couldn't remember anything about a company with these kinds of resources. An overseas company, the veteran peddler pondered. Why does everybody think that? No, our boss is a human. My bro is the richest human in the King's region. Zion bragged. The peddler showed yet another confused expression. It had only been a few years before they came back from the King's region, and they hadn't ever heard of this company before. So, it was hard for them to believe that such a company would suddenly pop up in just a few years. Beep beep. As the peddlers tried to make sense of what they were currently witnessing in Neo Orcus, they suddenly heard a blaring sound coming from behind them. When they turned around, they saw these metallic box monstrosities that looked as huge as a boulder, coming towards them at a pace even faster than horses. They were stunned, unable to move away from the incoming horde of reborn automobile trucks coming from the highway roads. Zion had to pull them aside to the curb, letting the peddlers fall to there but with horrified expressions on their faces. What was that? The truck stopped just on the other side of the street. A few seconds later, the front door opened and the driver climbed down off the truck, revealing his short and stocky nature. A dwarf? They all screamed. Yeah, got a problem with that. The dwarf screamed back at them, annoyed. Don't stand still in the middle of the road next time. The dwarf shook his head and began to unload the tons of metal pipes from the truck, ignoring the shocked stares from the peddlers. But that's how... Zion flashed a smug smile. Believe me now? Haha. Everyone is always surprised when they find out Bro Mike was able to ally with the dwarves. All their questions were answered by Zion's bragging, but the peddlers simply couldn't believe the truth. Nobody in the Queen's region would believe it. Yet, the fact that a dwarf was right in front of their eyes was proof enough. They stayed silent for a few seconds, digesting everything they learned just a few minutes after entering Neo Orcus. All in all, everything came down to the Reborn Company. They never knew that a sleeping dragon was hiding in the countryside. Everyone in the Queen's region was clueless that such a company was even able to be friends with the notoriously unfriendly dwarves. Are you guys okay? Just then, a human boy with golden hair walked up to them and offered them his hand. We're okay, kid. Just trying to figure out how this Reborn Company was able to do all of this. Well, just ask, the boy replied to them casually. No, the veteran peddler denied. It will be hard to get an audience with the owner of this Reborn Company. They must be on the same level as eyes and his likes. Shiana smiled and approached the peddlers. You have been given an invitation by Lord Michael. There is no other greater authority in the Reborn Company other than him. The peddlers hurriedly stood up and fixed their attire. That would be great. Where can we meet him? Shiana smiled and gently guided their gazes toward the young boy with the golden hair. This is Lord Michael. He is who you're looking for. The peddlers were once again slack-jawed upon finding out that this boy was more than what meets the eye. Come, Michael said. We have some business to discuss. It's my understanding that you are peddlers navigating the Queen's region. Am I right? Well, it just so happens that we have a few products we'd like to spread over there. The peddlers followed Michael over to his house, with the Dragonborns and the elderly locals of Neo Orcus following closely behind. And the whole time, the peddlers couldn't help but stare at the small stature of Michael, their minds still undecided if what they were seeing was an illusion or not. Once they were inside, Michael invited them to lay down their rucksacks and sit on his couch. Forgive my rudeness, but are you really the owner of the Reborn Company? How old are you? Did you perchance find a rejuvenating potion that turned you back into a child? Because I simply cannot understand. The veteran peddler let out all of his questions at once. He had been holding onto his curiosity for far too long. Michael chuckled. Please, I'm only turning 12 years old. But yes, I am the owner of the Reborn Company. The peddlers would have questioned the authenticity of his words, but the mere fact that 5 dragon-like demi-humans were standing at his sides was much better than any authenticity paper that he could present to them. Earning the respect and loyalty of the draconic race was not something a normal human could do, even if they had the money. Let's get to business, shall we? Michael signaled over for Shiina to bring over the batch of cookies and chocolate they had prepared earlier that day. Upon receiving the basket, the peddler's business-minded eye immediately noticed the unique and eye-catching packaging of these products. Just the visual presentation of it alone was enough to entice any would-be customers who looked at the product. The violet and gold paper-like wrapping also showed a sense of both luxury and necessity. It looked like the kind of product that was expensive but was worth the price. "This is what you're selling?" the veteran peddler asked Michael. His eyes no longer showed any confusion. This little demonstration of the Reborn products already told the veteran peddler that he was dealing with someone extremely skilled and knowledgeable in the area of business. After all, his nose was itching. His body was telling him that he might be holding onto a piece of product that could bring him tons of profits. Michael probably knew that, and that was why he asked to meet with the peddlers. "This is just a mock-up of our eventual chocolate line of products, so the design is not finished yet. We weren't planning on selling the chocolate yet, but as fate would have it, you guys appeared here at the perfect time." The veteran peddler took one of the chocolate bars and took it off its paper wrapping. A sweet smell wafted to his nose. He took a single bite, and the rush of sugar exploded in his mouth, surprising him. "Senior," the other peddlers were alarmed. "I'm okay," the veteran said, waving off their concern. "This chocolate, is it made out of sugar?" "Sugar." The rest of the peddlers rummaged through their baskets and took out their chocolate bars, unwrapping them and taking a bite in a single move. Upon feeling the chocolate melt in their mouths, their eyes widened, and a moment later, they dove in and ate the whole thing in a couple of bites. Michael watched on with a satisfied smile. "Try the other one. We called it the chocolate chip cookie." They began to unwrap the cylindrical wrapper, showing a few stacks of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. They tasted it too, and liked it even better than just pure chocolate. These cookies could be eaten for breakfast, lunch, or dinner without the taste getting bland. "I'm sure that as peddlers, you know the proper market to sell this kind of snack, right?" The veteran peddler nodded. "These will be popular in the big cities, where the population is on the younger side. It will probably do great in the capital cities." Michael thought so as well. If he played the marketing of his products right, then he could replicate the culture of chocolate giving during times of anniversaries or birthdays. Back in his old world, Valentine's Day was celebrated globally, with the selling of flowers and chocolates spiking up. "What do you think? Do you want to become chocolate merchants?" Michael's question made the peddlers look at their veteran leader. Whatever he decided, they would decide too. The veteran looked at the golden R stamped onto the very chocolate itself, clearly showing the name of the Reborn company and letting it imprint on anyone's mind every time they bit into the chocolate. It was brilliant. That was how the veteran peddler described the Reborn company's ideas. And it wasn't just their chocolates. It was everything else in this town as well. The free-flowing water, the flat roads, and the monstrous horseless carriages as well. The Reborn company was ahead of the game, and it would only be a matter of time until their waves washed over to the Queen's region. And by that point, it would already be too late for a small-time peddler like him to join. This was the only time he could join. He could still ride the wave, and it will take them to the top. This was a life-changing decision. "Yes, please. We would like to sell these chocolates," the veteran proudly accepted. Michael stood up and faced the peddlers, shaking their hands one by one. "Now, here's my proposal. I want you to sell these products everywhere in the Queen's region, with a certain percentage of the sales going to you as commission." Michael began to elaborate on their arrangement for this business. He told them how much the chocolates were going to be sold for, which was just above the average price of a normal pastry. It was on the expensive end, but still affordable. A fraction of that price would be their earnings, which surprised the peddlers as it was a much better deal than they were even hoping for. After all, they didn't even have to buy the chocolates. They would just have to sell them. Oh, and if you have any more merchant friends, make sure to tell them about this opportunity. Maybe they want to become chocolate merchants too. The Rebornians were quite accommodating as they quickly arranged for the peddlers to have their own lodging for the night. which they sorely needed because it had been quite a whirlwind of events for the peddlers. They would not be weirded out if they woke up the next day and found that everything had just been a dream. Yet the next day, after they finalized their agreement with Michael and the Reborn company, they were still here, standing on the newly constructed flat roads with horseless carriages crossing the streets. This was real, and even though it had only been a day, they saw that some parts of the town suddenly had flat concrete roads magically out of nowhere. They knew nothing about construction, but they knew that this kind of speed was insane. From what they heard from the Rebornians, it seemed that this was still considered slow for them. Compared to the manpower they had in the King's region, the speed of production in Neo Orcus was like comparing a single drop from a bucketful. Last night, they chatted with some of the locals and the Dragonborns about their experiences in the King's region. They heard all kinds of stories about stars landing on the ground, exciting baseball games, booming music, and something about an air conditioning unit of some kind. They didn't understand anything, but their curiosity for the King's region and the nation of Reborn piqued from the description alone. What more if they experienced it firsthand? If they didn't have a job to do in the Queen's region, then the peddlers would have wanted to visit the King's region and try out the automobile taxi in Kingsbridge. They heard that a week's worth of travel was slashed down to only one day. As peddlers, they were incredibly fascinated with the thought of owning an automobile. "It's decided. I'll save up for a car," the rookie peddler announced. The locals of Neo Orcus toasted to the new guy, as they too wanted to buy an automobile of their own. The peddlers had to stay in Neo Orcus for a couple more days as they waited for the production of the chocolate and cookie products they were going to sell. To pass the time, they frequently roamed around Neo Orcus, familiarizing themselves with the new structures and design of the town. They were amazed at how complex and beautiful everything was despite how fast they were building it. One particular day, they came across Michael and his Dragonborn attendants looking over the remnants of the northern gate of Neo Orcus. Usually it was just the Rebornian engineers overseeing the construction, but this time it looked like even the big boss was involved. "I wonder what they're building over there," the rookie peddler asked out loud. The veteran stopped in his tracks as he realized where he was. This used to be the genesis, the first step towards the Golden Road, he muttered under his breath. Even though the structures and the old architecture were gone, the veteran peddler still recognized the vastness and grandiosity of the road on the horizon. It used to symbolize a literal road to wealth for most aspiring merchants, including him. The other peddlers knew about the Golden Road, but were born too late to witness its prime, only its decline. "Excuse me, Sir Michael, but are you doing what I think you're doing?" The veteran peddler saw the very beginnings of road construction on the gates. Metal rebars were ready to be installed underground, with only the liquid concrete needed to finally start its construction. "Yes, you've guessed right," Michael replied. "I'm trying to rebuild the Golden Road." Just hearing those words come out of Michael's mouth almost made the veteran peddler shiver. He didn't know if he was afraid or excited. Probably a mix of both. "Are you really undertaking this task? Are you not worried? Is it even possible?" "Yes, even if it isn't," Michael replied confidently. The Dragonborns beside him smiled, showing their complete faith and devotion to Michael. There was a fire in their eyes that showed their desire to fulfill his wishes, with no option for failure. They weren't the only ones. Practically every Rebornian shared the same passion for furthering Michael's goals. "Yeah, I'll punch anyone that gets in our way," Zion said, punching the air excitedly. "Lord Michael doesn't have to do anything. We will be enough," Shiana said casually. Seeing this, the veteran peddler had a premonition that they would be the one to finally re-establish the Golden Road to its prime condition. It must be said that this new Golden Road would be completely different from the old one. There was a distinct difference between the two, and it was the fact that the Reborn company was able to plant their flag into Neo Orcus before anyone else. This was a crucial point that would give them the edge over anyone else from the very start. If Michael was able to restart the popularity of the Golden Road, then the Reborn company would also be taken up with it. The two names would practically be synonymous with each other. Once that happened, nobody would be able to refute it. It was written in a binding contract. The Reborn company secured its spot in one of the most crucial points in the Queen's region without anyone even knowing about it. Even if others knew it beforehand, they would disregard it as nothing important. In their eyes, Orcus Town had already degraded past its usefulness. They would think that only a fool would sink so much time and money into making Orcus Town functional as a society. But they didn't know what the nation of Reborn could do as a whole. Michael had the help of the dwarves. He had dragonborns whose power was comparable to the top adventurers in the Queen's region. And most of all, he had amazing products that could sweep the entire continent in one fell swoop. If there was anyone who could do this nigh impossible task, then it was none other than Michael and his Reborn company.